10 years ago, I walked out into a blinding blizzard with nothing but a battered suitcase and $150 crumpled in my freezing fist. My family had just finished telling anyone who would listen that I was completely unstable, a hopeless failure who would never amount to anything. For an entire decade, I embraced the silence they forced upon me, building an empire from the absolute ground up. Then last week, my sister finally decided to Google my name. Within 24 hours, the absolute silence of my life was shattered by 65 desperate voicemails, all begging the supposedly unstable daughter to save them from total ruin. I am Sera, 32 years old, and I am the founder and CEO of Aegis Biogen. Before I reveal exactly how I responded to their sudden realization of my net worth, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever turned a toxic family's ultimate betrayal into the foundation of your own untouchable success. The private elevator to my Manhattan penthouse opens only after a retinal scan confirms my identity. It is a seamless, silent process that perfectly matches the life I have meticulously constructed. Stepping out into the grand foyer, the floor-to-ceiling windows offer an uninterrupted panoramic view of the city skyline and Central Park below. The space is a sanctuary of minimalist luxury, decorated in slate grays, deep navies, and stark whites. Every surface is immaculate, reflecting the precision required to run a biotechnology corporation pioneering organ recovery therapies. I shrug off my custom-tailored charcoal blazer, draping it over a leather chair, and walk toward the marble kitchen island. The absolute quiet of my home is something I earned a stark contrast to the screaming matches and chaotic manipulation that defined my upbringing in Connecticut. I pour myself a glass of sparkling water, enjoying the solitude that comes with knowing no one can reach me unless I explicitly allow it. That peace is abruptly shattered when a specific phone on my counter illuminates. It is a secondary unlisted device I keep strictly for extreme corporate emergencies, a number known only to my highest-level security personnel and top legal counsel. But as I pick it up, the screen displays a barrage of notifications that make my pulse steady into a cold, rhythmic beat. 65 missed calls, 65 voicemails, all accumulated within the span of a single day. I do not need to check the area code to know where they originated. The past has a way of loudly announcing its return. I tap the screen, bypassing the security lock, and press play on the first message. The speakerphone amplifies a voice I have not heard in a decade. "Sera, it is your mother." The voice is breathless, dripping with a manufactured panic that used to make me drop everything to appease her. Eleanor Thorne has not changed her tactics. "Sera, you need to pick up the phone right now." Cassandra showed us the article. We saw the Forbes cover. "I cannot believe you hid this from us. We are your family, Sera. We are all you have. Please call me back immediately. We are in terrible trouble and we know you have the money to fix it. Family is everything, sweetie." I take a slow sip of my water, my expression completely neutral, and let the messages automatically skip to the next. Now it is my older brother Toby, his tone frantic and aggressive, entirely characteristic of a man who spent his life gambling away other people's money. "Sera, listen to me. They are going to take the house. They are going to take Dad's firm. You cannot just sit up in some glass tower while your own flesh and blood goes bankrupt. We saw the valuation of your company. A fraction of a percent of what you have could save us. Pick up the damn phone." The barrage continues, a chaotic crescendo of overlapping demands, fake crying, and desperate pleas. Cassandra's voice chimes in on message 14, her usual condescension replaced by sheer panic. "Sera, please. My credit cards are declining. They are going to repossess my car. You owe us for raising you. You owe us for putting up with your issues. Just write a check. It is nothing to you now." Then comes message 42, the deep, authoritative timbre of my father, Franklin. The voice that used to terrify me into submission now just sounds hollow and pathetic. "Sera, this is your father. I am instructing you to contact my attorney immediately. We took you in. We fed you. We gave you our name. You have a moral and financial obligation to this family. Stop acting like an unstable child and come home to handle your responsibilities. Hearing Franklin call me unstable again is the exact catalyst I need. I do not feel anger. I do not feel sadness. I simply feel a chilling clarity as the penthouse around me fades away, replaced by the biting, unforgiving wind of a Connecticut winter 10 years ago. I am 22 years old again, standing on the frozen porch of the Thorne family estate. The snow is falling so thick it blinds me, soaking through my thin canvas jacket. My teeth are chattering violently, but the physical cold is nothing compared to the ice in my father's eyes as he stands in the warm, brightly lit doorway. Behind him, Eleanor is sipping red wine, refusing to make eye contact. Toby is smirking from the staircase, and Cassandra is literally inspecting her manicure, entirely unbothered by the fact that her sister is being thrown out into a blizzard. The dispute had reached its breaking point an hour earlier. Franklin's accounting firm was failing, drowning in debt due to his own gross mismanagement and Toby's reckless spending. They demanded I sign over the trust fund my grandmother had explicitly left in my name, the only money I had for my future. When I refused, recognizing it would be poured into a sinking ship, the narrative instantly shifted. I was no longer an independent adult making a sound financial choice. I was suddenly a selfish, mentally unstable burden who was destroying the family. You are mentally unstable. Franklin screams, his face red with rage, as the winter wind howls between us. You have always been a sick, ungrateful disappointment. We try to save this family and you hoard money like a parasite. He throws a battered, duct-taped suitcase out onto the porch. It hits my shins, bursting open slightly to reveal my hastily packed clothes. Then, with a look of absolute disgust, he reaches into his pocket, pulls out a wad of bills and throws them at my chest. The money flutters down into the snow. $150 is too much for a failure like you. He spits out, his voice dripping with venom. Do not ever show your face at this house again. You are nothing to us. The heavy oak door slams shut with a definitive booming thud. The deadbolt clicks into place. I am left standing in the dark, the snow accumulating on my shoulders, staring at $350 bills half buried in the freezing slush. I do not cry. I do not knock on the door begging for forgiveness. I simply kneel down, my bare hands stinging against the ice, and gather the crumpled bills. I close my suitcase, grip the broken handle, and walk down the long driveway, into the whiteout conditions, stepping into a void of absolute uncertainty. The memory dissolves, leaving me standing in my pristine Manhattan kitchen. The final voicemail clicks off, leaving the penthouse in total silence once more. They threw me away for protecting my own future, branding me crazy to justify their cruelty. For 10 years, I built Aegis Biogen from nothing, turning biological science into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, while they presumably continued their cycle of financial ruin and toxic manipulation. Now facing the consequences of their own actions, they believe they can simply dial my number and demand salvation. I pick up the phone, tapping the screen to delete the entire voicemail history in one swift motion. I do not block their numbers. Blocking them would mean I am hiding. Instead, I walk over to my briefcase, pull out a sleek, heavily encrypted tablet, and open a highly confidential financial dossier. The file is labeled Vanguard Capital Portfolio Acquisition. It contains the exact details of the distressed debt I quietly purchased 6 months ago through a shell corporation. Franklin Thorne believes he is calling his estranged, unstable daughter to beg for a handout. He has absolutely no idea that he has spent the last 24 hours leaving voicemails for the very person who now owns the mortgage to his house, the deed to his failing business, and every single cent of his outstanding debt. 200 miles away from my silent penthouse, the Thorne family estate in Connecticut is rotting from the inside out. Once a pristine symbol of upper-middle-class superiority, the sprawling colonial home now reeks of desperation and deferred maintenance. The white exterior paint is peeling off in jagged strips like dead skin. The front lawn, formerly manicured to country club standards, is overgrown and littered with final notice letters the postman simply tossed onto the porch. Inside the house, the atmosphere is entirely toxic. The grand chandelier in the foyer has 3 burnt-out bulbs that no one can afford to replace. The air conditioning is broken, leaving the stagnant summer heat to trap the sour smell of cheap scotch and mounting panic. In the formal dining room, Franklin sits at the head of a scratched mahogany table, surrounded by a mountain of past due bills and legal threats. His accounting firm is not just failing, it is paralyzed by massive debts and gross negligence. He rubs his bloodshot eyes, gripping a glass of generic liquor, while Eleanor paces the floor behind him. My mother is desperately trying to polish a tarnished silver tea set, clinging to the pathetic illusion of wealth. She mutters about the country club threatening to revoke their membership over unpaid dues, completely ignoring the reality that their entire financial existence is hours away from complete obliteration. Toby bursts into the dining room, his face pale and slick with nervous sweat. He clutches his smartphone like a live grenade, furiously declining an incoming call from an unrecognized number. My older brother thought he could outsmart the financial markets by leveraging the family business assets into volatile cryptocurrency schemes. Now, aggressive collection agencies and angry investors are hunting him down for margin calls he cannot cover. He paces the oriental rug, cursing at his phone screen, knowing his reckless gambling has accelerated the destruction of Franklin's firm. Every declined call is a stark reminder that his digital fortune was an elaborate mirage. Imani steps into the dining room right behind him, her arms crossed tight over her chest. Toby's wife is a sharp, practical corporate auditor, and she is the only person in this house who refuses to participate in their collective delusion. Her dark eyes lock onto Toby with absolute disgust. She demands to know why another $5,000 is missing from their joint checking account. Toby stammers, throwing out pathetic excuses about a temporary liquidity freeze, but Imani cuts him off immediately. She tells him she ran a background check on his latest investment platform and found it was a complete Ponzi scheme. Before Toby can formulate another lie, the front door slams open with enough force to rattle the window panes. Cassandra storms down the hallway, her face flushed a furious, humiliating red. She throws a handful of plastic cards onto the dining table, scattering Franklin's foreclosure notices. Her premium platinum credit cards were just publicly declined at the prestigious private academy her children attend. The school administrator had gently suggested she clean out her children's lockers if the outstanding tuition balance was not settled by Friday. Cassandra screams at Franklin, unable to process the reality of being poor. Dion walks in quietly behind his wife, looking utterly exhausted. Cassandra's husband is a pragmatic high school principal, a grounded man who has grown incredibly weary of the Thorne family's constant posturing. He places a hand on Cassandra's shoulder, telling her in a calm, steady voice that they need to pull the kids out of the private academy immediately and enroll them in public school. He explains that they cannot afford their luxury SUV payments anymore and need to downsize their lifestyle today. Cassandra violently shakes off his hand, shrieking that her children will not associate with public school kids. The dining room instantly erupts into a vicious, deafening shouting match. Toby blames Franklin for taking out a second mortgage to cover up the firm's failing audits. Franklin screams at Toby for stealing from the business accounts to fund his fake crypto empire. Cassandra blames both of them for humiliating her in front of the other private school mothers. Eleanor tries to shout over all of them, insisting that they just need a temporary bridge loan from a private investor to tide them over until the market corrects itself. Right in the center of the mahogany table, buried beneath the scattered declined credit cards and the final utility bills, sits the undeniable truth. A bright red foreclosure notice from Vanguard Capital Bank, demanding immediate vacation of the premises within 30 days. The Thorne family is completely out of time, out of money, and out of lies. Cassandra snatches her declined platinum cards from the table, her hands trembling with a toxic mix of humiliation and rage. She needs a scapegoat, someone to project her failure onto, so she does not have to face the terrifying reality of her own financial collapse. Her 2 children, ages 8 and 10, are sitting on the living room sofa watching the chaotic screaming match with wide, frightened eyes. Cassandra marches into the living room, deciding this is the perfect moment to teach her children a twisted lesson about the importance of family loyalty and following the rules. She wants to show them exactly what happens to people who disrespect the Thorne family name and strike out on their own. She pulls out her smartphone, her manicured thumb jabbing aggressively at the screen. She tells her children to pay close attention, explaining that she is going to show them a picture of their Aunt Sera. Cassandra paints a vivid, grotesque picture of a woman who threw her life away, a cautionary tale of a mentally unstable outcast who probably lives under a bridge because she refused to help her father's business. She opens the Google search app, typing in Serafina Thorne, with a vindictive smirk, fully expecting to find a mugshot, a bankruptcy filing, or absolutely nothing at all. She wants to project an image of total destitution to validate her own crumbling sense of superiority. Cassandra hits search. The results load instantly, but the smirk on her face vanishes, replaced by an expression of profound, uncomprehending shock. She blinks, wiping a stray hair from her face, convinced she has typed the name incorrectly. The entire first page of Google is not a barren wasteland of failure. It is a wall-to-wall testament of unimaginable astronomical success. Her thumb hovers over the screen, paralyzed, as her eyes dart across the bold, undeniable headlines dominating the search results. Right at the top, occupying the featured snippet space, is a high-resolution image from the digital cover of Forbes magazine. The headline reads in massive, unapologetic font, "Sera Thorne Biotech's youngest self-made billionaire." The photograph shows Sera standing in a sleek, glass-walled laboratory, wearing a sharply tailored charcoal suit, her expression radiating absolute, untouchable power. The subheading details her role as the visionary founder and CEO of Aegis Biogen, a company revolutionizing organ recovery therapies with a current market valuation exceeding $12 billion. Cassandra's breath catches in her throat. She clicks on the Forbes link, her mind violently rejecting the information her eyes are processing. The article details Sera's ruthless ascent in the tech world, highlighting her genius-level intellect and her unyielding business acumen. It mentions her recent acquisition of a sprawling Manhattan penthouse and her status as a primary disruptor in the global healthcare sector. There are no mentions of mental instability. There are no mentions of a supportive family. There is only the story of a woman who built an empire entirely on her own. A strange, strangled noise escapes Cassandra's throat, a sound caught halfway between a gasp and a scream. Her children stare at her, confused by the sudden, terrifying shift in her demeanor. Cassandra stumbles backward, her phone slipping from her grip and clattering onto the hardwood floor. The screen remains lit, the Forbes cover staring up like a silent, mocking judge. The shouting match in the dining room abruptly halts as Franklin, Eleanor, Toby, and Amani rush into the living room, alarmed by the sound of Cassandra's distress. "What is it?" Eleanor demands, pushing past Toby to reach her daughter. "Did the school call back?" Cassandra cannot speak. She simply points a trembling finger at the phone on the floor. Franklin steps forward, his brow furrowed in irritation, and picks up the device. He squints at the screen, his reading glasses perched on the edge of his nose. For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound in the house is the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then the blood completely drains from Franklin's face. His hands begin to shake so violently that he nearly drops the phone again. $1 billion. Franklin whispers, his voice cracking, the words sounding foreign and impossible on his tongue. She is a billionaire. The words hit the room like a physical shockwave. Toby snatches the phone from his father's hands, his eyes widening in manic, desperate greed as he reads the valuation numbers. Eleanor covers her mouth with both hands, a sudden calculating light sparking in her eyes, as the sheer magnitude of Sera's wealth overrides her previous panic about the country club dues. The room descends into a chaotic, frenzied silence as the realization washes over them. The daughter they threw into a blizzard with $150 is now holding the key to a fortune that could buy and sell their entire existence 1,000 times over. Dion steps forward, his tall, broad-shouldered frame casting a long shadow across the scattered bills on the dining room floor. He picks up Cassandra's discarded phone, his thumb swiping through the Forbes article, his expression grim and completely devoid of the manic excitement that has infected the rest of the Thorne family. He reads the details of Sera's hostile takeovers, her unyielding negotiation tactics, and the sheer brutal efficiency with which she runs Aegis Biogen. He hands the phone back to Franklin, shaking his head slowly. He looks at his in-laws, his voice carrying the calm, authoritative weight he uses to discipline unruly high school students. "She is not going to save you," Dion says, his words dropping like lead weights into the room's frantic atmosphere. "Look at what she has become. Look at how she operates. You threw her out into a blizzard 10 years ago with absolutely nothing. You have spent a decade calling her mentally unstable and erasing her from this family's history. A woman who builds a $12 billion empire from scratch does not suffer fools, and she certainly does not reward the people who tried to destroy her." Franklin bristles, his aristocratic pride rearing its ugly head despite his imminent bankruptcy. He points a trembling finger at Dion, his voice rising in defensive indignation. "She is my daughter," he snaps. "She carries the Thorne name. We provided her with a private education, a roof over her head, and the foundation she needed to succeed. This family made her who she is today, and she owes us. She owes this firm." Dion lets out a short, humorless laugh. He looks at Cassandra, his eyes silently pleading with her to see reason to step away from the delusional arrogance that is dragging them all down. But Cassandra is already mentally spending Sera's money, her eyes glazed over with visions of reinstated country club memberships and new designer wardrobes. Dion sighs, crossing his arms over his chest. "You did not provide a foundation, Franklin. You provided trauma. You provided the catalyst for her to realize she needed to become untouchable. If you reach out to her now asking for a handout, she will not just refuse you, she will crush whatever is left of this family." Eleanor waves a dismissive hand, stepping into the center of the room with a sudden, terrifying burst of energy. Her eyes are bright with calculation, her mind already spinning a web of toxic manipulation. She ignores Dion, completely turning her attention to Franklin and Toby. "We are not going to ask for a handout," she declares, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We are going to welcome our beloved daughter home. We are going to celebrate her incredible success. We are going to remind her of the unbreakable bonds of family." Eleanor begins to pace her heels, clicking rapidly against the hardwood floor. "We will host a grand reconciliation dinner right here in this house. We will invite the extended family, the neighbors, and most importantly, the local press. The Connecticut Chronicle has been dying for a local angle on the Aegis Biogen story. We will give them an exclusive. The triumphant return of the hometown billionaire to the loving embrace of her proud parents." Toby's eyes light up, catching on to his mother's scheme. "It is brilliant," he says, a slick, greasy smile spreading across his face. "We control the narrative. If the press is here snapping photos of our tearful reunion, Sera will be trapped. She cares about her public image. A CEO of a publicly traded biotech firm cannot afford the PR nightmare of turning her back on her devoted middle-class family in front of flashing cameras. She will have to play along." Imani, who has been watching the entire exchange with mounting horror, finally speaks up. "Are you people insane?" she demands, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You are planning to ambush a billionaire CEO with a fake party to extort money from her. This is not just manipulative, it is suicidal. You are dealing with someone who destroys corporate raiders for breakfast. She will see right through this." Eleanor turns on Imani, her expression hardening into a mask of pure elitist contempt. "You do not understand how this family works, Imani. Blood is thicker than water. Sera may be successful, but deep down she is still the sensitive, desperate girl who wanted our approval. When she sees us, when she feels the warmth of her childhood home, she will remember where she belongs. And she will want to share her blessings with the people who love her most." Dion shakes his head, utterly appalled by the sheer magnitude of their delusion. He turns to Cassandra, his voice low and urgent. "We are leaving," he says. "Now. Pack a bag for the kids. We are going to my mother's house in Hartford. I will not let our children be a part of this extortion attempt. I will not let them watch you people humiliate yourselves. Cassandra violently shoves him away, her face contorted in an ugly, desperate snarl. I am not going anywhere, she spits. This is my sister. This is my family's money. If you want to run away and be poor, go ahead. But I am staying right here, and I am going to get exactly what I am owed. Dion stares at his wife, recognizing for the first time that the woman he married is completely lost to the toxicity of the Thorne family legacy. He nods slowly, a profound sadness settling over his features. He turns without another word, walking toward the stairs to pack his children's belongings. Imani follows him, throwing one last disgusted look at Toby before disappearing down the hallway. Franklin, Eleanor, Toby, and Cassandra are left standing in the ruined dining room, completely unbothered by the departure of the only rational people in the house. Eleanor claps her hands together, the sound echoing sharply against the peeling walls. All right, she commands, her voice crisp and authoritative. Toby, call the caterers and put it on whatever credit card still has a balance. Cassandra, start drafting a press release for the Chronicle. Franklin, call Sera's office. Tell her assistant that her mother has fallen seriously ill, and her dying wish is to see her eldest daughter one last time. The Thorne family springs into action, fueled by a toxic cocktail of desperation, greed, and a profound underestimation of the woman they threw away. They believe they are setting a brilliant, inescapable trap for a vulnerable daughter. They have no idea they are simply building the stage for their own absolute public annihilation. 72 hours later, the Thorne family estate is bathed in the harsh, unflattering glare of rented halogen lights. Eleanor managed to secure a discount catering service and a local photographer from the Connecticut Chronicle, transforming the decaying first floor into a desperate pantomime of upper-middle-class prosperity. The broken air conditioning unit forces the humid evening air to hang heavy in the living room, mixing with the scent of discounted floral arrangements and reheated hors d'oeuvres. Neighbors who have not spoken to the Thornes in years mingle awkwardly by the staircase, drawn solely by the neighborhood gossip that a billionaire is about to walk through the front door. Franklin paces near the entryway, nervously adjusting a suit jacket that has not fit him properly in half a decade, waiting for the daughter he threw away to arrive and save him from his own ruin. Outside on the cracked pavement of the driveway, there is no screaming motorcade. There are no flashing police escorts or bulky bodyguards clearing a path. A single unmarked black sedan glides silently up to the curb, its tires crunching softly against the loose gravel they could not afford to replace. The vehicle is heavily armored, a standard precaution for a corporate executive of my tier, but outwardly, it draws absolutely no attention. The driver shifts the car into park and moves to open the rear door, but I am already stepping out into the muggy Connecticut evening. I do not need an entourage to announce my presence. True power does not require a parade. I stand on the sidewalk, adjusting the cuffs of my tailored black silk blazer. The outfit is completely devoid of logos or flashy accessories, yet the cut and fabric radiate a quiet, lethal authority that demands immediate respect. I look up at the house that served as my personal prison for 2 decades. The string lights Eleanor rented fail miserably to hide the rotting wooden eaves and the sagging gutters. The illusion of wealth they fought so violently to protect is literally crumbling off the walls. 10 years ago, I looked back at this structure through a blinding snowstorm, shivering and terrified. Tonight, I look at it as a predator examines a cornered, exhausted prey. A sudden burst of bright light breaks my concentration. The local photographer from the Chronicle is standing near the overgrown rose bushes, snapping pictures in rapid succession. A local reporter steps forward holding a digital recorder, his eyes wide with the adrenaline of securing an exclusive scoop. He expects me to smile, to wave, to offer a heartwarming quote about returning to my roots. I do none of those things. I fix my gaze on the camera lens with absolute chilling indifference. I do not break stride, nor do I shy away from the flashes. I simply let them capture the exact demeanor of a woman who has arrived not to celebrate, but to collect a debt. I walk up the stone pathway, my heels clicking methodically against the pavement. The front door is propped wide open to combat the oppressive heat inside the house. Before I even cross the threshold, the unmistakable smell of cheap mass-produced catering hits me. It is a sharp contrast to the lavish organic spreads Eleanor used to insist upon during her peak country club days. I step into the foyer, my eyes scanning the sad folding tables covered in flimsy white linens. Stacks of plastic plates try to masquerade as fine china, and lukewarm chafing dishes hold wilted vegetables and dry pasta. It is a desperate, pathetic display of a family grasping at straws. The low murmur of the gathered guests halts the absolute second my foot crosses the entryway. Neighbors and distant relatives turn to stare, their conversations dying in their throats. They remember the quiet, anxious girl who was constantly belittled by her mother and overshadowed by her siblings. The woman standing before them now is a stranger, a towering figure of corporate dominance who commands the room simply by breathing the air inside it. The crowd instinctively parts like the Red Sea, creating a wide, unobstructed path leading directly into the living room. I walk slowly down the makeshift aisle, observing the faces of the people who stood by and watched my family destroy me. Some offer nervous, hesitant smiles. Others look away, deeply intimidated by the cold calculation in my eyes. I do not acknowledge a single one of them. My attention is entirely focused on the four figures standing rigidly in front of the unlit fireplace. Franklin, Eleanor, Toby, and Cassandra are lined up like actors waiting for their cue on a stage. They are sweating profusely, both from the broken climate control and the crushing weight of their impending bankruptcy. My assistant had relayed Eleanor's frantic message 3 days ago, the pathetic lie about a sudden terminal illness and a dying wish to see her eldest daughter. I knew it was a complete fabrication the moment the words were spoken. Medical records for Aegis Biogen executives and their immediate biological relatives are monitored through private health networks, and Eleanor Thorne was in perfectly fine physical health. The only thing dying in this house was their credit score. I came anyway, perfectly willing to play the role of the concerned daughter, because shutting down their fraudulent performance in person is a necessary step in my strategy. Toby shifts his weight from side to side, his eyes darting toward the expensive watch on my wrist, clearly calculating its liquidation value. Cassandra is wearing a dress that is at least 3 seasons old, her arms crossed tightly as she fights a losing battle against her own raging jealousy. Franklin tries to puff out his chest, attempting to project the patriarchal authority he lost the moment his accounting firm defaulted on its massive loans. None of them recognize the danger they are in. They still believe they are the ones laying a trap. I stop exactly 5 feet away from my parents. The silence in the living room is absolute, heavy, and suffocating. The photographer snaps another photo from the hallway, the flash briefly illuminating the desperate greed etched into my family's faces. They are waiting for me to break down, to run into their arms, to offer the emotional and financial salvation they feel entitled to. I do not move a single muscle. I simply look at Eleanor, waiting for her to initiate the theatrical performance that will ultimately trigger her absolute, inescapable downfall. Eleanor breaks the silence, launching herself across the fading oriental rug with her arms outstretched. She wears a desperate, manic smile, her eyes wide with a manufactured joy that is entirely betrayed by the calculation in her gaze. "Sera, my beautiful girl," she cries, her voice echoing loudly in the stuffy room. "You came home to us." I step sideways, smoothly dodging the embrace. Eleanor stumbles slightly, her hands grasping at empty air before she recovers her balance, her smile turning brittle and strained. I do not offer a greeting. I simply stand there, projecting absolute stillness, waiting for the performance to continue. Franklin steps forward next, his chest puffed out in a pathetic attempt to assert dominance. He extends a hand, aiming for a professional handshake, the kind he used to offer business associates before his firm collapsed. I look at his extended hand, then slowly raise my gaze to meet his eyes. The air between us crackles with a decade of unspoken hostility. I do not take his hand. Franklin slowly lowers his arm, a flush of humiliation creeping up his neck as he realizes the power dynamic has irrevocably shifted. Cassandra, unable to tolerate being out of the spotlight for more than a minute, pushes past her parents. She wears a tight, forced smile, her eyes already scanning my outfit, silently calculating its cost. "It is so good to see you, Sera," she says, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We have all missed you so much. It is just awful that we lost touch, especially now that the kids are getting older. They need their aunt." I raise an eyebrow, my expression impassive. They need their aunt? Or they need their aunt's bank account? I ask, my voice cool and even. Cassandra recoils, a flash of genuine anger crossing her features before she forces the smile back into place. "Sera, do not be like that." She chides, her tone adopting the familiar condescending edge she used when we were children. "We are family. Family helps each other. And right now we really need your help." She launches into a rehearsed speech about the importance of family legacy and the unbearable stress of her current financial situation. She details the exorbitant cost of her children's private academy, whining about how unfair it is that she might have to pull them out. "The school is being completely unreasonable," she complains, waving a hand dismissively. "They are demanding full payment by Friday, or the kids lose their spots. It is just a temporary cash flow problem, but they will not listen. We thought since you have been so blessed recently, you might want to contribute to your nephew's education." I listen quietly, letting her finish the entire manipulative pitch. When she finally stops waiting expectantly for me to offer a blank check, I tilt my head slightly. "A temporary cash flow problem," I repeat, my tone perfectly neutral. "That is an interesting way to describe maxing out 4 platinum credit cards and defaulting on a luxury SUV lease while your husband's salary barely covers the mortgage." Cassandra's jaw drops. "How do you know about that?" she demands, her voice rising in panic. I ignore the question, stepping closer to her. "Tell me, Cassandra." I say, my voice dropping to a conversational murmur that carries clearly across the silent room. "If I pay this tuition, what is your long-term financial strategy? Are you planning to liquidate the assets you have hidden in that offshore account, or are you just hoping I will fund your lifestyle indefinitely?" The room gasps collectively. Eleanor's hands fly to her mouth and Franklin stares at Cassandra in utter disbelief. "What offshore account?" Franklin barks, turning on his daughter. "You told me you were broke." Cassandra's face turns a mottled, furious red. "She is lying," she shrieks, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She is just trying to cause trouble like she always does." I smile, a cold, sharp expression that offers absolutely no comfort. "I am a CEO, Cassandra. I do not invest in failing enterprises without conducting thorough due diligence. If you want a handout, you need to present a viable business plan. Right now, your only strategy seems to be extortion, and frankly, your execution is embarrassing." Cassandra opens her mouth to scream, but the words die in her throat as she realizes the futility of her position. She cannot deny the truth, and she cannot manipulate me. She spins around and storms out of the living room, leaving a stunned, chaotic silence in her wake. Eleanor rushes after her, desperately trying to salvage the situation, while Franklin stands frozen, the reality of his family's utter dysfunction finally breaking through his arrogant facade. I remain exactly where I am, watching the carefully constructed illusion of the Thorne family shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Imani stands near the archway leading to the dining room, a glass of lukewarm, sparkling water untouched in her hand. As a corporate auditor for a top-tier firm, her entire career is built on identifying discrepancies, noticing what others miss, and understanding the unspoken language of high-stakes negotiations. While the rest of the Thorne family is blinded by the blinding, desperate hope of a financial bailout, Imani is watching Sera with the detached, analytical precision of a predator assessing a rival. She observes the way Sera's posture remains perfectly relaxed, the way her eyes track every movement in the room without betraying a single emotion, and the subtle, almost imperceptible way her left hand rests against the side of her silk blazer. It is the watch that catches Imani's attention. It is a sleek, matte black piece of wearable technology, deliberately understated but clearly expensive. Every few minutes, as the chaotic, desperate conversation ebbs and flows, around her Sera's right index finger taps the face of the watch twice in rapid succession. It is not a nervous tick. It is a deliberate, calculated action. Imani narrows her eyes, her mind racing through the technical specifications of high-end corporate wearables. It is an audio indexing feature. Sera is not just recording this entire humiliating spectacle, she is actively dropping timestamps to highlight specific incriminating statements. The realization hits Imani like a bucket of ice water. Sera did not come here to be bullied, guilt-tripped, or manipulated. She came here to gather evidence. Every lie Eleanor tells, every threat Cassandra makes, every demand Franklin barks out, is being digitally immortalized, likely streaming directly to a secure cloud server monitored by a team of ruthless corporate attorneys. Imani looks around the room at her in-laws, feeling a sudden intense wave of secondhand embarrassment and genuine fear. They are standing on the tracks waving at an oncoming freight train, completely convinced they can command it to stop. Imani moves swiftly, navigating through the crowd of confused, whispering neighbors. She spots Toby hovering near the hors d'oeuvres table, his eyes locked onto Sera with a manic, feral intensity. He is practically vibrating with greed, mentally calculating how much of Sera's $12 billion valuation he can siphon off to cover his catastrophic crypto debts. Imani grabs his arm, her grip tight and unrelenting, and drags him forcefully into the dim, overheated hallway leading to the kitchen. "What are you doing?" Toby hisses, trying to pull away. "I need to be in there. I need to figure out how to pitch my new investment portfolio to her. If I can just get 5 minutes alone with her, I can explain the leverage ratios." Imani stares at her husband, marveling at the sheer suffocating depth of his delusion. "Toby," she says, her voice a harsh, urgent whisper. "You need to listen to me right now. We need to leave this house. Go upstairs, pack whatever fits in a duffel bag, and we are walking out the back door." Toby looks at her as if she has lost her mind. "Leave? Are you insane? My billionaire sister is standing in the living room. This is our ticket out, Imani. This is how we save the house. This is how I pay off the margin calls." Imani shakes her head, her frustration boiling over. "She is not a ticket out, Toby. She is an executioner. Look at her. Really look at her. She is wearing a smart watch that is actively recording every single word spoken in that room. She is dropping timestamps every time your mother or Cassandra says something incriminating. She is building a case, Toby. She is going to destroy your parents, and if you get in her way, she will destroy you too." Toby scoffs, waving a dismissive hand. "You are being paranoid. She is just showing off. She is still the same desperate, insecure girl who used to beg for Dad's attention. She wants us to grovel, fine. I will grovel. But at the end of the day, she is family, and family takes care of their own." Imani steps closer, her voice dropping an octave, cold and precise. "Toby, I audit Fortune 500 companies for a living. I know what a hostile takeover looks like. Sera Thorne did not build a $12 billion empire by handing out charity to people who threw her onto the street with $150. She is here for blood. If you do not walk out that back door with me right now, I am leaving without you. And I am taking the car." Toby stares at her, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, before the overwhelming, desperate greed swallows it whole. He pulls his arm out of her grasp, his expression hardening into the arrogant, entitled mask that defines the Thorne family. "You do what you want, Imani, but I am not walking away from $1 billion. I am going to get my share." Imani watches him turn and walk back toward the living room, heading straight into the blast radius. She feels a profound, absolute finality settle over her. She does not argue. She does not plead. She simply turns on her heel, walks silently through the kitchen, and steps out the back door into the muggy Connecticut night, leaving the Thorne family to their inevitable, spectacular destruction. Eleanor refuses to let the evening collapse. She claps her hands together, the sharp sound cutting through the thick, oppressive heat of the living room. She loudly announces that dinner is served, her voice strained with a desperate, frantic cheerfulness. The remaining neighbors and local press awkwardly shuffle toward the periphery, sensing the impending disaster, but too fascinated by the unfolding train wreck to actually leave. I follow my mother into the formal dining room, my posture perfectly relaxed. I take a seat near the center of the scratched mahogany table. Cassandra, having recovered a fraction of her composure after her earlier humiliation, slinks back into the room and drops into a chair opposite me. Toby sits to my right, sweating profusely, willfully ignoring the fact that his wife just abandoned him to save herself. Franklin stands at the head of the table, popping the cork on a bottle of heavily discounted champagne with trembling hands. Franklin pours the cheap, overly sweet liquid into the crystal flutes, splashing a generous amount onto the stained tablecloth. He raises his glass high, plastering a wide, patriarchal smile across his sweating face. He looks around the table, desperately trying to command the room the way he did a decade ago. To family, Franklin declares, his voice booming with artificial warmth. To forgiveness, to fresh starts, and to the triumphant return of our brilliant daughter. Welcome home, Sera. Eleanor and Toby raise their glasses, immediately chiming in with breathless echoes of agreement. I pick up my flute by the stem, inspecting the rising bubbles with total detachment. I do not raise it. I do not drink. I simply set the glass back down on the table, the sharp clink of crystal against wood silencing their pathetic chorus. A toast to family. I repeat, my voice low, perfectly modulated, and carrying effortlessly across the dead quiet of the dining room. I fold my hands together, resting them on the table. Let us also raise a glass to the $150 that bought my permanent exit from it. The exact amount of money you threw at my chest while pushing me into a blizzard. The air in the room instantly turns to lead. Eleanor drops her glass, the champagne spilling over the rim and soaking into her napkin. Franklin's forced smile completely dissolves his jaw, clenching so tight the veins in his neck bulge. Toby shifts violently in his seat, shooting panicked glances at the local reporter standing near the archway. They immediately launch into a synchronized, well-rehearsed campaign of absolute gaslighting. Franklin aggressively shakes his head, insisting my memory is completely distorted by time and emotion. He claims he never actually kicked me out, spinning a ludicrous fantasy that I chose to run away because I simply could not handle the rules of his household. Eleanor leans forward, reaching out as if to touch my arm, but retracts her hand when she meets my freezing gaze. She adopts the tone of a wounded, misunderstood martyr. We had to push you out of the nest, Sera. She pleads, her eyes wide with manufactured sincerity. You were so unmotivated back then, so confused and unstable. That night broke my heart, but it was tough love. We had to do it to make you strong. Look at you now. Look at the incredible empire you built. You should be thanking us. We gave you the push you needed to succeed. I tapped the face of my smartwatch twice, marking the exact timestamp of her confession. Tough love. I repeat the phrase, letting the sheer absurdity of it hang in the humid air. So throwing a 22-year-old girl into freezing whiteout conditions with no winter coat and pocket change was an incubator for entrepreneurial success. You are sitting here under a sagging roof facing total bankruptcy, and you are trying to claim my $12 billion company is the direct result of your brilliant parenting strategy. The absolute magnitude of your delusion is genuinely staggering. Toby, entirely blinded by his mounting crypto debts and terrified of losing his only perceived lifeline, attempts to play the diplomatic peacemaker. He leans over, lowering his voice in a pathetic show of camaraderie. Come on, Sera, he urges, offering a greasy, placating smile. Dad was under a massive amount of pressure with the accounting firm back then. We all said things we regret. We all made mistakes. But we are here now. The past is the past. We are ready to make amends, pool our resources, and move forward together as partners. I turn my head slowly, locking my eyes onto Toby, making him shrink back into his chair. Partners. I say the word, slicing through the room like a scalpel. That implies an equal contribution of value. I shift my gaze directly back to Franklin, pinning him to his seat. You did not give me tough love to make me strong. You threw me out because I flatly refused to sign over my grandmother's trust fund to save your failing, fraudulent accounting firm. You sacrificed your own daughter to buy yourself a few more months of country club dinners and luxury car leases. Franklin violently slams his fist onto the mahogany table, the force rattling the cheap silverware and shattering the last remaining fragments of his composed facade. The mask drops completely, revealing the ugly, venomous tyrant he has always been. "You were living under my roof," he roars, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson, completely forgetting the reporters standing just feet away. "It was family money. You were a selfish, unstable brat who hoarded cash while this family bled to death. The trap is now fully sprung." I sit perfectly still, watching him breathe heavily, knowing I have him exactly where I want him, on the permanent digital record, admitting the absolute financial truth behind a decade of abuse. Franklin's breathing slows as the echo of his own shouting fades into the humid air of the dining room. He glances nervously toward the hallway, realizing he just handed the local press a soundbite of his own toxic abuse. He quickly straightens his posture, tugging at the lapels of his outdated suit jacket, desperately trying to regain control of the narrative. He misinterprets my complete silence as a sign of submission, mistaking my icy observation for the fearful hesitation of the 22-year-old girl he kicked out into a blizzard. He truly believes his patriarchal dominance still holds weight in this room. He reaches a trembling hand into the breast pocket of his jacket. The sound of rustling paper cuts through the suffocating tension of the dining room. Franklin pulls out a thick, crisply folded stack of legal documents. He slaps the heavy packet onto the scratched mahogany table. With a forceful, aggressive shove, he slides the paperwork directly across the wood until it stops mere inches from my folded hands. A cheap ballpoint pen rolls across the table, bumping against the edge of the contract. I do not flinch. I do not reach for the document. I merely lower my gaze to read the bold, capitalized header printed across the top page. It is a comprehensive debt assumption and liability transfer agreement. I scan the visible figures upside down my mind, instantly processing the sheer catastrophic magnitude of their financial ruin. $3 million. It is a legally binding contract meticulously designed to chain my personal, unencumbered assets directly to the rotting, debt-ridden carcass of his accounting firm and Toby's catastrophic crypto margin calls. Franklin clears his throat, adopting the artificial, commanding boardroom voice he used to use to intimidate junior accountants. He tells me that maintaining a family legacy requires sacrifice, investment, and unconditional loyalty. He explains that this document is a simple formality, a strategic bridge loan of sorts, where I agree to personally guarantee their outstanding commercial and private liabilities. In exchange for bailing them out of $3 million of toxic debt, he magnanimously offers me a 10% silent partner equity stake in his entirely worthless, failing firm. Eleanor nods enthusiastically from the sidelines, wiping away a dry, imaginary tear, to perform for the reporters hovering in the archway. She calls it a beautiful, synergistic partnership, a way to formally welcome me back into the Thorne family fold after a decade of unfortunate misunderstandings. Toby leans heavily against the table, his eyes darting frantically from the document to the pen. He urges me to just sign on the dotted line so he can call the collection agencies in the morning and clear up this whole messy, stressful situation. I slowly pick up the cheap ballpoint pen, rolling the plastic cylinder deliberately between my thumb and index finger. The entire room holds its collective breath. The local photographer shifts his weight, raising his camera, ready to capture the heartwarming, redemptive moment the billionaire daughter signs away her fortune to save her struggling family. I look directly into Franklin's bloodshot eyes, my expression utterly devoid of warmth, empathy, or familial duty. I ask him why a billionaire CEO would blindly sign a blanket assumption of $3 million in toxic, unsecured debt without first conducting a forensic audit of the corporate ledgers. Franklin's face tightens, the muscles in his jaw ticking violently. The fragile facade of the professional, measured businessman slips completely away, revealing the desperate, cornered tyrant beneath. He slams both of his palms flat against the dining room table, leaning his weight forward until he is looming over the contract. He plays the ultimate desperate card he has been holding onto for decades. He lowers his voice into a vicious, commanding growl, telling me I am going to sign the contract because I owe this family my very existence. "We took you in." Franklin spits the words, dripping with decades of held-over resentment and toxic entitlement. "We raised you. We clothed you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head and paid for your medical bills when you were having your little mental episodes. You did not build that $12 billion empire by yourself. You built it on the foundation we provided. You owe us this money. It is the absolute least you can do to repay your lifelong debt to the Thorn name. Cassandra, emboldened by her father's aggressive, demanding stance, chimes in from across the table. She whines that her children are going to be expelled, and her social life will be ruined because of my ridiculous selfishness. She insists that $3 million is literally pocket change for someone with my net worth, and that refusing to sign makes me a heartless monster. She demands that I stop being petty about a misunderstanding from 10 years ago and write the check to save her from public humiliation. I stop rolling the pen. I place it deliberately back onto the mahogany table, aligning it perfectly parallel to the edge of the legal document. My heart rate does not elevate by a single beat. This is exactly what I anticipated when I instructed my security team to drive me to this address. They do not view me as a daughter, a sister, or even a human being. They view me as an ATM, a lucrative financial asset they believe they have the divine right to liquidate at their convenience. They actually believe the manufactured guilt of my upbringing will override my ruthless corporate instincts. I look down at the legal document, then look back up at the four faces staring at me with hungry, predatory anticipation. I tap the face of my smartwatch twice, locking the audio timestamp. I ask Franklin if he truly believes my debt to this family has not already been paid in full. I ask him if he honestly thinks I spent the last 10 years completely blind to the severe financial crimes he committed using my personal information while I was sleeping in homeless shelters. I let the question hang in the heavy, stifling air of the dining room. Franklin stares at me, his eyes darting frantically as his brain struggles to comprehend that his ultimate secret has been breached. For a fraction of a second, raw terror flashes across his aging face. Then the silence is broken by a sound that completely shatters the manufactured tension of the room. I begin to laugh. It is not a hysterical emotional outburst, nor is it the nervous giggle of a child seeking approval. It is a low, melodic, and entirely ruthless sound. It is the laugh of a chief executive officer who has just watched a rival walk blindly into a devastating corporate ambush. The sound of my laughter reverberates off the peeling wallpaper, causing the remaining guests hovering in the archway to exchange highly uncomfortable glances. Eleanor physically recoils, her hands flying up to clutch her pearls in a textbook display of faux maternal distress. Toby shifts his weight so violently his chair groans against the hardwood floor. Cassandra stares at me as if I have suddenly grown a second head. They expected tears capitulation, or perhaps a screaming match they could easily dismiss as a temper tantrum. They did not expect the chilling, absolute amusement of a woman who holds their total destruction in the palm of her hand. Franklin's face twists into a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. The sheer audacity of my laughter strips away his remaining shreds of patriarchal dignity. He slams his hand against the mahogany table again, the impact rattling the cheap crystal champagne flutes. He points a trembling accusatory finger directly at my face, reverting instantly to the exact same psychological warfare he utilized a decade ago. He loudly declares that I am completely delusional, fabricating wild paranoid fantasies to justify my own selfish hoarding of wealth. He insists that his accounting firm has always operated with the utmost ethical standards and that my accusations are the ravings of a deeply disturbed mind. Eleanor immediately seizes the opportunity to reinforce the gaslighting, stepping smoothly into her designated role as the long-suffering martyred mother. She turns her body slightly toward the local photographer and the neighbors clustered in the hallway, ensuring she has a captive audience for her performance. She lowers her voice to a loud theatrical whisper, dripping with venomous pity. She tells the room that this is exactly why they had to ask me to leave 10 years ago. She claims my mental state has always been incredibly fragile, prone to severe bouts of paranoia and aggressive delusions that tore their loving family apart. Cassandra eagerly jumps into the fray, her voice shrill and piercing as she tries to secure her own financial salvation by destroying my credibility. She crosses her arms tightly, glaring at me across the table with naked hostility. She loudly reminds the crowd that I was always the problem child, the one who could never handle the basic pressures of a normal life. She insists that my billions must have been acquired through sheer luck or manipulation because I am clearly too unstable to manage a functional business. She tells Franklin to take the contract back, sneering that a mentally ill woman probably cannot even sign a legally binding document anyway. Toby, sweating through his outdated dress shirt, desperately tries to play both sides, revealing the absolute pathetic depth of his greed. He waves his hands in a placating gesture, begging everyone to just calm down and focus on the paperwork. He tells me that my memory is clearly compromised by the trauma of living on the streets, gently suggesting that I am confusing normal administrative banking errors with intentional fraud. He promises that if I just sign the $3 million debt assumption, he will personally help me find a top-tier psychiatrist to work through these unfortunate lingering delusions. I sit perfectly still, allowing the barrage of coordinated gaslighting to wash over me without absorbing a single drop of their poison. 10 years ago, this exact orchestrated assault would have triggered a massive panic attack. I would have doubted my own sanity, cried until my throat was raw, and begged them to believe me. Today, their desperate lies merely serve as the final confirmation that my impending retaliation is completely and utterly justified. I tap my smartwatch once more, ensuring the high-definition audio recording captures every single defamatory statement they are making in front of the local press. Franklin, emboldened by the synchronized support of his wife and children, leans heavily across the table. His bloodshot eyes narrow into vicious slits as he prepares to deliver what he mistakenly believes is the killing blow to my defiance. He raises his voice to a booming, authoritative roar, projecting his words into the hallway for maximum public humiliation. He tells me that I am nothing but a sick, unstable dropout who got lucky in the tech sector. He screams that I will always be the crazy daughter they had to discard to protect the rest of their normal, healthy children. The word unstable echoes sharply against the high ceilings of the decaying house. The local reporter from the Connecticut Chronicle furiously scribbles notes on his digital pad, capturing the explosive deterioration of the Thorne family reunion. The neighbors stand frozen in shocked silence, witnessing the ugly, abusive reality that was always hidden behind the Thornes' manicured lawns and country club memberships. Franklin stands tall at the head of the table, his chest heaving with exertion, waiting for me to shatter into a million irreparable pieces under the weight of his public condemnation. Instead of shattering, I move. I place my hands flat against the scratched surface of the mahogany table. My movements are unhurried, meticulously controlled, and entirely deliberate. I push my chair back. The wooden legs scrape loudly against the floorboards, a harsh grating sound that acts as a physical punctuation mark to Franklin's screaming tirade. I rise to my feet, drawing myself up to my full height. I smooth the lapels of my tailored silk blazer, my posture radiating the immense, crushing gravity of a billionaire chief executive who is about to terminate a hostile negotiation. The physical shift in the power dynamic is instantaneous and suffocating. The moment I stand, I completely dwarf Franklin's pathetic, crumbling authority. The entire room goes dead silent. The frantic whispers of the neighbors instantly cease. The shutter of the photographer's camera stops clicking. Eleanor's theatrical sobbing abruptly halts, the fake tears drying instantly on her panicked face. Cassandra shrinks back into her chair, her arrogant sneer dissolving into genuine, wide-eyed apprehension. Toby stops sweating and starts visibly shaking, finally realizing that his sister is not a vulnerable target, but an apex predator. I look down at Franklin, holding his gaze with an intensity so freezing and absolute that he physically takes a half-step backward. The air in the dining room feels as though it has been instantly vacuumed out, leaving them all gasping for breath. They are suddenly terrifyingly aware that the woman standing before them is not the broken 22-year-old they discarded in the snow. I am the architect of their impending doom, and I am holding the detonator directly in my hand. The silence stretches out heavy and lethal, wrapping around the Thorne family like a tightening noose. They have played their final desperate card, exhausting their arsenal of manipulation, gaslighting, and public humiliation. They stand completely unarmed before the colossal, undeniable reality of my power. I let the silence linger for exactly 10 seconds, ensuring the absolute gravity of their fatal miscalculations sinks deep into their bones, before I drop the evidence that will eradicate their entire existence. The 10 seconds expire. I do not raise my voice. I do not need to. I reach inside the interior pocket of my tailored silk blazer. My movements are deliberate, unhurried, and entirely devoid of the frantic energy consuming the rest of the room. I bypass my smartphone and extract a thick, heavy dossier bound in premium black leather. The gold-embossed Aegis Biogen corporate logo catches the harsh glare of the rented halogen lights overhead. I hold it suspended over the table for a fraction of a second before letting it drop. The heavy, authoritative thud of the leather striking the mahogany sounds exactly like a judge's gavel finalizing a life sentence. I slide it forward, the sheer weight of my dossier violently shoving Franklin's pathetic, crumpled debt assumption contract entirely off the edge of the table. It flutters uselessly to the floor, landing in a crumpled heap near Toby's sweaty dress shoes. I look directly past my gasping parents and lock eyes with the reporter from the Connecticut Chronicle who is standing frozen in the archway. I instruct him in a voice that commands absolute obedience to make certain his digital recorder is functioning perfectly. I announce to the entire room that if we are going to publicly discuss my mental stability and the financial legacy of the Thorne family, we are going to do it with absolute documented precision. I flip open the heavy cover of the dossier. The pages inside are meticulously organized, heavily redacted in thick black ink to protect my proprietary corporate assets, but leaving the most damning personal financial records entirely visible for the world to see. "You called me unstable, Franklin," I say, my voice slicing through the suffocating humid air like a surgical scalpel. "You stood on this exact floor 10 years ago, branded me a psychotic failure, and threw me into a blinding blizzard with $150. You told the neighbors I had run away to join a dangerous cult. You told your wealthy country club friends I was locked away in an intensive rehabilitation facility. You constructed a beautiful, tragic narrative of a heartbroken, loving father dealing with a deeply disturbed daughter. It was a spectacular, award-winning performance, but it was nothing more than a smokescreen designed to cover up a systemic, multi-year federal crime." Eleanor lets out a high, terrified squeak. She lunges forward, her manicured hands scrambling aggressively across the table to grab the open folder. I slam my palm flat against the document, stopping her dead in her tracks. My eyes flash with a warning so severe, so completely devoid of daughterly affection, that she physically recoils. She whimpers, shrinking back behind her husband's broad shoulders like a frightened animal. I turn my attention back to the crowd, raising my hand and openly inviting the neighbors and the press to step closer. I invite them to view the pristine, notarized copies of bank statements, loan applications, and default notices I have carefully arranged in chronological order. Let us examine the true legal definition of family support, I announce, tapping a freshly manicured fingernail against the top document. This is a commercial loan application from Vanguard Capital Bank, dated exactly 3 weeks after you kicked me out of this house. I was sleeping on a flattened piece of cardboard under a highway overpass, eating half-eaten bagels out of a commercial dumpster to survive. I had absolutely no fixed address, zero income, and no hope. Yet somehow, a girl freezing on the streets successfully applied for a $200,000 line of business credit. Franklin's jaw drops open. He looks like a man who has just stepped on a landmine and heard the lethal click beneath his heel. He begins to stammer uncontrollably, throwing out fragmented, nonsensical syllables about administrative banking errors and outdated joint accounts. I cut him off instantly, my voice echoing with lethal corporate authority. I state clearly that there was no administrative error. I tell the horrified room that my loving, devoted parents retained a copy of my Social Security card and my original birth certificate. They deliberately used my stolen identity to secure fraudulent funding just to keep this rotting accounting firm afloat for another financial quarter. The local photographer gasps audibly, his camera lowering as the sheer, devastating scale of the betrayal fully registers. I flip to the next page in the dossier, the crisp sound of the heavy paper echoing in the dead silence. This is a second loan, I continue, relentlessly pointing to a brightly highlighted section. $75,000 taken out under my name exactly 6 months later. I was working 3 minimum wage jobs, saving every single penny to rent a tiny roach-infested studio apartment in the cheapest part of the city. When the landlord ran my credit check, I was denied instantly. My credit score was completely and utterly obliterated. I was flagged as a severe delinquency risk across every major financial institution in the state. Cassandra covers her mouth with both hands, her eyes darting frantically between me and our parents. Even she, with all her toxic jealousy and blinding entitlement, did not know the criminal depths of their depravity. I look directly at my sister, ensuring she understands exactly how her luxurious lifestyle was funded while I was starving. "Do you remember your lavish destination wedding, Cassandra?" I ask softly, the quiet tone infinitely more terrifying than a scream. "Do you remember the $50,000 floral arrangements and the custom designer silk gown you bragged about? That was funded by a third fraudulent loan taken out using my social security number. You walked down the aisle and drank expensive champagne on the stolen, ruined credit of your homeless sister." Toby is violently shaking his head, backing away from the dining table, as if the wood itself is suddenly on fire. He looks at Franklin with absolute undisguised horror. "You stole her identity," Toby whispers, his own reckless crypto scams suddenly looking like petty playground theft compared to this monumental, calculating betrayal. "You ruined her entire life while she was living on the streets just to pay for a wedding and keep up appearances at the country club." I do not let them catch their breath or formulate a defense. I flip to the fourth and final document in this section of the dossier. I detail the fourth loan, a massive private mortgage leveraged directly against my identity to cover Toby's first failed venture capital pitch. I explain to the silent captive audience that my parents did not just kick me out to teach me a lesson about independence. They kicked me out because they desperately needed a silent, absent scapegoat. They needed a ghost they could financially crucify in order to sustain their own pathetic illusions of grandeur without any risk of being caught. Eleanor bursts into hysterical, ugly tears. Her perfectly crafted matriarchal image shatters completely. She drops to her knees right there on the stained oriental rug, clutching the edge of the mahogany table with white knuckles. "Sera, please," she wails, her voice grating and desperate, entirely stripped of its usual condescension. "We had no choice. The firm was going under. We were going to lose this beautiful house. We always intended to pay every single cent back. We were going to fix your credit report as soon as the market turned around. We did it to save the family legacy. You have to understand, we did it out of love." Out of love, I repeat the phrase as if it is a foreign, disgusting concept. "You stole my legal identity, ruined my ability to secure basic shelter, and forced me to fight tooth and nail through the absolute gutters of society. You sat in your exclusive country club sipping imported wine, wearing expensive dresses bought with my stolen credit, while I suffered through freezing nights and debilitating panic attacks alone. You intentionally branded me mentally unstable so that if I ever found out and tried to report you to the authorities, the police would dismiss me as a crazy, vindictive, lying daughter. That is not love, Eleanor. That is calculated, parasitic sociopathy." The reporter from the Chronicle is typing so fast his fingers are an absolute blur. The neighbors are whispering frantically to one another, their faces pale with profound shock and utter disgust. The perfect, respectable Thorne family has been entirely unmasked as a syndicate of ruthless identity thieves. Franklin tries desperately to salvage his crumbling empire, raising his hands in a pathetic, shaking gesture of surrender. He stammers that they will make it right immediately, that they will transfer equity to my name, that the $3 million debt assumption contract currently lying on the floor is actually a strategic way to consolidate their assets and clear my name. I look down at the crumpled contract lying by Toby's foot, then shift my freezing gaze back up to the man who sired me. You want me to pick up a pen and sign a document assuming $3 million of your toxic failing debt? I say, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. You actually want the billionaire CEO of Aegis Biogen to blindly bail out the petty criminals who stole her social security number. You genuinely believe that a few fake theatrical tears and a catered plate of cold pasta will miraculously erase a decade of federal wire fraud and systemic identity theft. I close the black leather dossier with a resounding, definitive snap that makes my mother flinch violently on the floor. I state with absolute unwavering clarity that I will not sign a single piece of paper to save their fraudulent enterprise. I will not offer them a single solitary cent of my $12 billion valuation. I tell them that the only legal documents I will be signing moving forward are sworn affidavits for the federal authorities. I stand perfectly still, watching the remaining color drain completely from Franklin's face as the crushing, inescapable reality of his impending prison sentence finally takes hold. The crushing, inescapable reality of his impending prison sentence finally takes hold. Then the silence in the dining room shatters completely. But the explosion of rage is not directed at me. Toby violently kicks his chair backward, the wood splintering against the baseboard. He points a shaking, sweat-drenched finger directly at Franklin's chest. Toby screams that Franklin kept the vast majority of the stolen money for himself. He accuses his own father of hoarding the fraudulent loan payouts to cover up massive, embarrassing losses at the accounting firm while feeding his children nothing but table scraps. Toby is hyperventilating, his eyes wide with a manic, terrified realization that he might go to federal prison for a conspiracy he barely profited from. Toby continues his vicious verbal assault, completely abandoning any remaining shred of family loyalty. He tells the entire room, including the furiously scribbling local reporter, about Franklin's secret off-the-books bank accounts. He exposes the lavish weekend trips his father took to offshore casinos and the extravagant bonuses Franklin paid himself while the company was secretly drowning in the red. Toby shouts that he was begging for basic seed money to launch his legitimate investment portfolios, but Franklin greedily locked away the stolen cash to maintain his pathetic patriarchal illusion of success. Franklin snaps out of his paralyzed state, his survival instincts overriding his shock. He lunges across the mahogany table, grabbing Toby by the collar of his cheap dress shirt. Franklin spits back that Toby is a delusional, parasitic gambling addict. He loudly informs the horrified guests that Toby secretly bypassed the firm's security protocols and drained their legitimate operating accounts to fund his idiotic cryptocurrency scams. Franklin roars that he only had to take out the final massive fraudulent loan in my name because Toby had literally stolen the family's emergency reserves to buy worthless digital tokens. Cassandra lets out a piercing, ear-splitting shriek. Her head snaps back and forth between her father and her brother as the absolute magnitude of their financial betrayal sinks in. She realizes that her children's private school tuition is not bouncing because of a temporary cash flow problem. It is bouncing because Toby gambled away the very stolen funds she felt inherently entitled to. Cassandra launches herself at Toby, her manicured nails curled into claws. She screams that he ruined her life, accusing him of stealing the money that was supposed to secure her family's place in high society. But Cassandra does not stop with Toby. She pivots with whiplash speed and turns her ferocious rage onto Eleanor. She accuses her mother of being completely complicit in the financial ruin. Cassandra shouts that Eleanor knew about the failing firm and the crypto losses, yet continued to drain their remaining credit to fund her ridiculous country club luncheons and spa retreats. She cries out that Eleanor sat back and watched her own daughter drown in platinum credit card debt without ever warning her that the Thorne family vault was completely empty. Eleanor scrambles backward on the stained oriental rug, her face a mask of ruined mascara and pure panic. She immediately throws Cassandra right under the bus to save her own skin. Eleanor shrieks that Cassandra has absolutely no right to play the victim. She reminds the entire room that my stolen identity paid directly for Cassandra's lavish $50,000 destination wedding, and the down payment on her luxury SUV. Eleanor screams that Cassandra is an ungrateful, spoiled brat who gladly spent the stolen money without ever once questioning where it came from. The pristine, highly curated image of the Thorne family completely vaporizes right before my eyes. The living room degenerates into a chaotic, feral brawl. They are no longer a united front of upper-middle-class superiority. They are a pack of cornered, starving animals turning their fangs on each other to avoid taking the blame for a decade of federal crimes. The neighbors who came to witness a heartwarming billionaire reunion are now actively backing toward the front door, deeply disturbed by the vicious, unrelenting toxicity erupting in the dining room. I calmly reach across the table and pick up the bottle of discounted champagne Franklin opened earlier. I do not bother with the crystal flutes. I walk over to the antique sideboard, select a clean wine glass, and pour myself a generous measure. The bubbles hiss softly, a delicate counterpoint to the deafening screams of my mother and sister, hurling insults at each other across the room. I lean against the edge of the sideboard, crossing my ankles, perfectly comfortable in the center of the storm. This is the exact sequence of events I engineered the moment I decided to step out of my armored sedan. I did not need to raise my voice or engage in a pathetic screaming match to exact my revenge. All I had to do was drop the absolute truth onto the table and watch their inherent toxic greed do the rest of the heavy lifting. They are actively dismantling their own lives, offering up voluntary confessions of wire fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy to the local press, who is capturing every single second of their spectacular implosion. I take a slow, satisfying sip of the cheap champagne. It tastes like absolute victory. I watch Franklin attempt to restrain Toby while Cassandra hurls a plastic plate at Eleanor's head. 10 years ago, they united to destroy me in the freezing snow. Tonight I am warm, I am untouchable, and I am watching them burn their own empire to the ground without having to strike a single match. The deafening, chaotic brawl in the dining room reaches a fever pitch of toxic accusations and shattered glassware. Cassandra is practically hyperventilating, hurling insults at Toby, while Eleanor sobs hysterically on the stained oriental rug. Suddenly, the sharp, piercing chime of the front doorbell slices through the screaming. The sound echoes through the high ceilings of the decaying colonial house, an abrupt interruption that forces the Thorne family to freeze mid-sentence. The sheer volume of the chime acts like a physical circuit breaker, instantly halting the feral infighting that has consumed my parents and siblings for the last 20 minutes. The neighbors who have been inching toward the exit stop and turn their heads. The local reporter from the Connecticut Chronicle lowers his digital recorder, slightly sensing that this catastrophic family reunion is about to take another unprecedented turn. I do not flinch at the sound of the doorbell. I remain leaning casually against the antique sideboard, the stem of the wine glass resting easily between my fingers. I take another slow, deliberate sip of the cheap champagne, letting the acidic vintage burn the back of my throat. I know exactly who is standing on the crumbling front porch. I orchestrated their arrival down to the precise minute. I factored in the local traffic patterns and the time it would take for my family to completely expose their federal wire fraud on the digital record. Everything is proceeding according to the exact logistical parameters I established before I even stepped into my armored sedan. Eleanor gasps loudly, scrambling to her feet and frantically attempting to smooth the wrinkles out of her ruined dress. Her mind, forever trapped in the superficial delusion of high society, immediately assumes the arrival signifies the delayed catering staff bringing the dessert course. She wipes the smeared mascara from her cheeks, hissing at Cassandra to fix her posture. Toby physically recoils from the archway, his face turning an ashen, sickly shade of gray. His paranoid, guilt-ridden brain instantly jumps to the conclusion that the aggressive cryptocurrency debt collectors have finally tracked him down to exact physical payment for his catastrophic margin calls. He backs into the corner of the dining room, looking desperately for a rear exit that does not exist. Franklin takes a deep, shuddering breath, dragging his hands over his face in a desperate attempt to physically wipe away the humiliation of the last half hour. He buttons his outdated suit jacket, puffs out his chest, and forces his features into a rigid mask of patriarchal authority. He believes he must project strength to whoever is waiting outside, refusing to let the local press see him as a broken, bankrupt man. He marches out of the dining room and down the main hallway toward the foyer, his heavy footsteps echoing loudly against the warped floorboards. The entire house holds its collective breath as he grasps the brass handle and violently pulls the heavy oak door wide open. It is absolutely not the catering staff holding trays of dessert. Standing on the front porch, bathed in the harsh glare of the rented halogen lights, are three individuals whose sheer presence instantly plummets the temperature in the foyer by 10 degrees. Two of them are local county sheriff's deputies. They are dressed in full tactical uniform, their expressions entirely devoid of warmth or neighborly familiarity. They stand with their feet shoulder-width apart, their hands resting cautiously near their heavy utility belts, projecting an aura of absolute, uncompromising legal authority. They are not here to negotiate. They are here to enforce the law. Flanking the two armed deputies is a tall, sharp-featured man in an immaculate, custom-tailored navy blue suit. He clutches a thick, heavily secured leather briefcase in his left hand. The silver-embroidered logo, pinned meticulously to his lapel, catches the overhead light, identifying him immediately. He is a senior executive representative from Vanguard Capital Bank. This is the exact financial institution holding the $3 million balloon payment that Franklin miserably failed to meet. This is the bank that currently holds the crushing toxic mortgages and defaulted business loans that have been suffocating the Thorne family for the past 18 months. The senior banker does not wait for Franklin to offer a polite invitation. He steps smoothly over the threshold and into the foyer, his polished leather shoes stepping directly onto the frayed welcome mat. The two sheriff's deputies follow immediately behind him, their heavy boots thudding ominously against the hardwood floor. They enter the house with the specific aggressive momentum of officials executing a court-ordered mandate. They bypass Franklin entirely, moving into the main hallway, where they have a clear, unobstructed view of the dining room, the ruined catering tables, and the stunned crowd of neighbors and media personnel. Total suffocating panic washes over Eleanor. She lets out a strangled whimper, backing away until her shoulders hit the dining room wall. She recognizes the Vanguard Capital logo, immediately understanding that the absolute worst-case scenario has finally arrived at her front door. Cassandra lets out a sharp cry of dismay, her hands flying to her mouth, as the reality of her impending social and financial annihilation becomes physically present in the room. Toby looks like he is about to vomit, his knees buckling slightly as the armed deputies step further into the light. The physical manifestation of their federal crimes and financial ruin has come to collect. But Franklin reacts differently. He stares at the banker, then at the deputies, and then his gaze snaps directly across the room to me. He does not see an eviction force. Blindsided by his own monumental arrogance and his fundamental pathetic misunderstanding of corporate power dynamics, Franklin actually lets out a booming, relieved laugh. The sound is shockingly out of place, echoing wildly through the tense atmosphere of the house. He genuinely believes that my earlier silence and my refusal to sign his ridiculous paper contract was simply a strategic corporate delay. In Franklin's deeply delusional mind, a billionaire chief executive would never engage in petty paperwork at a dining room table. He operates under the toxic assumption that I have secretly summoned my own elite financial fixers to clean up his massive mess. He thinks I made a single phone call from my smartwatch to deploy Vanguard Capital representatives to instantly wipe out his $3 million debt. He believes I have dispatched armed deputies to protect the family estate from Toby's shady cryptocurrency creditors. He thinks he has won the ultimate jackpot. Franklin spreads his arms wide, gesturing expansively to the senior banker and the sheriff's deputies as if they are a lavish gift he personally ordered from a catalog. He turns his back on the officials and looks directly at the local reporter, ensuring the camera is actively recording his moment of supreme vindication. He wants the entire neighborhood to witness his ultimate patriarchal triumph. He wants everyone to know that despite the screaming and the ugly accusations, The Thorne family hierarchy remains completely intact and wildly successful. C. Franklin announces, his voice dripping with smug, overbearing entitlement and profound relief. He points a finger directly at me, a wide, triumphant grin stretching across his sweating face. My billionaire daughter is handling it. She called her bankers to pay off the debt and secure the estate. I told you all she would step up and save the family legacy. The Thorne name is untouchable. He stands there practically vibrating with arrogant validation, completely unaware that he has just proudly announced his own absolute destruction. Franklin's triumphant pose shatters instantly as the senior banker steps forward. Franklin extends his hand, a greasy, familiar smile plastered across his sweating face, fully prepared to welcome his ultimate financial savior. The Vanguard Capital executive does not even break his stride. He walks right past Franklin, his impeccably tailored suit brushing against my father's outdated, poorly fitting jacket, completely ignoring the eagerly extended hand. It is a calculated, devastating physical dismissal of Franklin's perceived patriarchal authority. The banker's eyes are locked entirely on me, bypassing the screaming mother, the sweating brother, and the ruined dining room table scattered with declined platinum cards. The banker halts exactly 3 feet away from where I am leaning casually against the antique sideboard. He plants his feet firmly on the hardwood floor, straightens his posture, and executes a crisp, deeply respectful bow of his head. It is not the standard greeting of a corporate creditor meeting a guarantor. It is the absolute, undeniable deference of a high-level corporate subordinate acknowledging his apex commander. The two armed sheriff's deputies flank him, immediately pivoting smoothly to face the rest of the room, their hands resting securely on their heavy utility belts, establishing an impenetrable physical barrier between my toxic family and me. Franklin stumbles awkwardly, his empty hand dropping limply to his side. The gears in his arrogant brain misfire catastrophically as he watches the powerful Vanguard executive bow to the exact same daughter he just loudly claimed was bailing him out. He lets out a confused, wet cough, aggressively demanding the banker turn around and explain the paperwork for the debt clearance. Franklin loudly insists that there must be some protocol mistake, shouting into the humid air that he is the patriarch of the Thorne family and the primary commercial account holder who needs to sign the discharge documents to save the estate. The executive does not even glance in Franklin's direction, treating his demands as nothing more than background noise. He places his heavy, secured leather briefcase onto the nearest pristine surface of the dining table, popping the dual silver clasps with a sharp, echoing click. He extracts a thick, formidable stack of legal documents printed on heavy premium cardstock. These are absolutely not financial discharge papers or bridge loan approvals. They carry the bright red, undeniable embossed seals of absolute corporate foreclosure, total asset seizure, and immediate property eviction. He aligns the paperwork meticulously on the mahogany wood, waiting silently for my explicit command to proceed. I remain perfectly composed, letting the suffocating tension stretch until it threatens to snap the very foundation of the decaying colonial house. I reach slowly into the interior pocket of my tailored silk blazer. I do not pull out a designer checkbook to save their social standing. I do not produce a gold-plated fountain pen to sign away my hard-earned billions to rescue a fraudulent accounting firm. Instead, I extract a solid, heavy piece of brushed titanium attached to a highly secure biometric lanyard. It is the undeniable physical manifestation of my untouchable corporate sovereignty. The object catches the harsh glare of the rented halogen lights, gleaming with cold metallic superiority against the backdrop of their crumbling middle-class facade. It is my official Aegis Biogen identification badge, prominently bearing my name, my facial scan, and the ultimate title of Chief Executive Officer. I raise the heavy titanium badge and drop it deliberately onto the scratched surface of the mahogany dining table. The heavy metal strikes the wood with a loud, resounding crack that echoes like a gunshot, slicing through the remaining pathetic illusions hovering in the humid air of the room. I lock my freezing gaze directly onto my father's bloodshot eyes. I do not raise my voice, allowing the absolute chilling certainty of my words to carry across the dead quiet space, ensuring the local press standing in the hallway captures every single syllable. I did not call them to pay your debt, Franklin, I say, pronouncing the words with lethal surgical precision. I called them to execute the foreclosure. The words hit the dining room with the kinetic, devastating force of a derailed freight train. Franklin physically staggers backward, his polished dress shoes slipping against the warped floorboards until his spine slams hard against the peeling floral wallpaper. His mouth drops open, his jaw hanging slack as he attempts to draw oxygen into his suddenly paralyzed lungs. The smug, overbearing entitlement completely vaporizes from his features, instantly replaced by a visceral, unadulterated terror. He realizes in one blinding flash of comprehension that the corporate cavalry he thought he summoned is actually his own personal firing squad. Eleanor lets out a blood-curdling primal shriek that shatters the remaining silence in the house. She lunges toward the mahogany table, her eyes wide with manic clawing desperation, frantically trying to read the upside-down text on the eviction documents the banker has laid out. Cassandra's knees completely buckle beneath her. She collapses heavily into a dining chair, gripping her hair with both hands, as the horrifying reality of losing her luxurious lifestyle, her private school status, and her entire fake social identity finally breaks her fragile, superficial mind. Toby tries to run. The sheer blinding panic of his cryptocurrency margin calls and his stolen funds overrides all rational thought. He spins around, his eyes frantically darting toward the main hallway, but he instantly spots the two armed sheriff's deputies blocking the only viable exit. He backs into the far corner of the dining room, hyperventilating, his chest heaving as he realizes the aggressive crypto debt collectors are the absolute least of his worries right now. The formal authorities are standing in his living room, and there is nowhere left to hide from his federal crimes. I look down at Eleanor, who is currently weeping over the red eviction seals stamped across the paperwork, her perfectly manicured hands shaking violently. Vanguard Capital does not accept charitable bailouts for commercial accounts, flagged for systemic wire fraud and multi-year identity theft. I explain to my hyperventilating family, my voice devoid of any familial warmth. They do not restructure toxic mortgages for men who steal their daughter's social security number to fund their gambling addictions and luxury car leases. They only accept total, immediate, and ruthless liquidation of all associated assets. The senior executive from Vanguard Capital finally speaks, breaking his absolute silence. His voice is crisp, clinical, and completely devoid of human sympathy, projected loud enough for the local press hovering in the archway to capture every single devastating syllable. On behalf of the primary asset holder, he announces, reading directly from the notarized judicial warrant. I am formally executing the immediate seizure of the Thorne family estate, the permanent freezing of all associated corporate and personal banking accounts, and the total revocation of all outstanding credit lines. You are officially financially terminated. The local reporter from the Connecticut Chronicle frantically types on his digital pad, capturing the absolute monumental devastation of a corrupt dynasty falling to pieces in real time. The flashing cameras document Franklin's physical collapse as he slides down the floral wallpaper to sit on the floor, a broken, hyperventilating man who built his entire identity on a house of cards that his discarded daughter just effortlessly incinerated. The neighbors watch in stunned, horrified fascination, finally seeing the ugly, bankrupt truth behind the pristine Thorne family facade they envied for decades. I stand tall in the center of the wreckage, my posture radiating total, unyielding victory. I reach out and retrieve my titanium CEO badge from the mahogany table, clipping it securely back onto the lapel of my blazer. I look down at the sobbing, hyperventilating strangers who used to call themselves my parents and my siblings, entirely unsympathetic to their spectacular ruin. I have officially stripped them of everything they value, using the exact same ruthless corporate mechanisms they once believed gave them the divine right to destroy me. Franklin stares at my ID badge, his chest heaving as his brain violently rejects the undeniable reality of his situation. He aggressively shakes his head, turning his desperate, bloodshot eyes back to the Vanguard Capital executive. He stammers out a pathetic demand for an explanation, insisting that a biotechnology corporation has absolutely no legal jurisdiction over private residential mortgages or commercial accounting liabilities. He points a trembling finger at me, shouting that I am nothing but a scientist, a lab coat wearing researcher who could not possibly hold the deed to his historic Connecticut estate. He loudly demands to speak to the branch manager, clinging to the delusional hope that this is simply a colossal administrative error. The senior banker does not flinch at Franklin's screaming. He smoothly opens his leather briefcase and extracts a thick, legally binding transfer of ownership document, placing it deliberately on the ruined mahogany table. He informs Franklin in a voice completely devoid of emotion that he does not work for the local retail banking branch. He is a senior director of corporate restructuring and distressed asset liquidation. He explains that major financial institutions routinely package and offload their toxic, unrecoverable debts to private equity firms and specialized asset management corporations to clear their own balance sheets. I step forward, taking over the explanation, my voice ringing with absolute lethal authority. I tell Franklin that he fundamentally misunderstood the scope of my corporate empire. 6 months ago, Aegis Biogen established a highly specialized subsidiary firm focused entirely on aggressive asset management and strategic acquisitions. We did not just build revolutionary organ recovery therapies. We built a financial war machine equipped with billions of dollars in liquid capital, designed specifically to absorb and liquidate distressed portfolios across the eastern seaboard. I slowly pace around the perimeter of the dining room, my heels clicking a steady, terrifying rhythm against the warped floorboards. I explain that Vanguard Capital was bleeding millions from a massive cluster of fraudulent commercial loans and defaulted private mortgages in this specific county. They were desperate to offload the dead weight for pennies on the dollar. When my subsidiary firm approached them with a lucrative all-cash buyout offer for their entire regional portfolio of toxic debt, they signed the transfer agreements without a single moment of hesitation. I stopped directly behind Franklin's chair, looking down at his sweating, balding head. I lean in slightly, lowering my voice so only he and the frantically typing reporter can hear the precise details of his ruin. I tell him that I legally purchased every single outstanding liability attached to his failing accounting business. I own the fraudulent loans he took out using my stolen Social Security number. I own the massive unregulated second mortgage he secretly leveraged against this very house to cover up his gross financial negligence. I am not just a creditor. I am the absolute owner of his entire financial existence. Toby lets out a strangled, pathetic whimper from the corner of the room, desperately trying to press himself into the peeling, floral wallpaper. I turn my freezing gaze to my older brother, watching the sheer terror dilate his pupils. I tell Toby that my acquisition strategy did not stop at Franklin's corporate fraud. I detail how my data analysts tracked the digital footprint of his catastrophic cryptocurrency gambling. I explain that the aggressive, shadowy collection agencies he has been hiding from for the past 8 months no longer hold his promissory notes. Toby begins to physically shake his knees, knocking together, as the crushing weight of his reality sets in. I inform him that my subsidiary firm bought his defaulted business loans right out from under his aggressive creditors. I own the massive margin calls he failed to cover. He realizes in one blinding, horrifying flash that he is no longer in debt to faceless internet brokers or angry investors. He is financially enslaved to the sister he relentlessly mocked, abused, and discarded. The sheer, inescapable terror of knowing I hold the absolute ledger to his freedom causes him to slide down the wall and bury his face in his hands. Cassandra is weeping uncontrollably in her dining chair, her makeup running in dark, ugly streaks down her flushed cheeks. I walk slowly toward her, stopping just out of arm's reach. I address her directly, bringing up the luxurious fake lifestyle she uses to project superiority at her exclusive country club. I list the designer clothes, the exorbitant private school tuitions she can no longer afford, and most importantly, the premium lease on the luxury SUV currently parked in the crumbling driveway outside. I looked down at my sobbing sister with profound, unadulterated disgust. I reveal that my corporate acquisition included the specific automotive financing portfolio that holds the lease to her precious vehicle. I explain that she has missed 4 consecutive payments, placing the account in severe, irrecoverable default. The SUV she uses to parade around her wealthy suburban neighborhood is legally owned by my corporation, and the repossession order has already been validated, stamped, and handed over to the local authorities. She owns absolutely nothing. A collective, suffocating realization descends upon the dining room. The Thorne family sits paralyzed in a massive graveyard of their own making. They finally understand that this catastrophic evening was not a sudden unlucky twist of fate or a spontaneous act of revenge. This was a meticulously engineered half-year-long financial siege. I had quietly, systematically surrounded them from every possible angle without them ever noticing the walls closing in. They spent the last 6 months arrogant and oblivious, completely unaware that I was buying the very ground beneath their feet. Eleanor, entirely stripped of her matriarchal pride, attempts one final pathetic plea for mercy. She crawls across the stained oriental rug, reaching out with trembling hands to grasp the hem of my tailored trousers. She begs me to consider the memories contained within these walls, crying about the holidays we spent together, and the home where she claims to have raised me with love. She gestures wildly to the peeling walls, and the broken chandelier, acting as if this decaying structure holds some sacred, unbreakable familial bond that can miraculously override a legal foreclosure document. I step back sharply, my expression hardening into a mask of pure, freezing disdain, refusing to let her toxic hands touch me. I look at the walls she is pointing to, explicitly recalling the absolute coldness, the vicious screaming matches, and the freezing winter night I was thrown out the front door like garbage. I systematically strip away every ounce of her manufactured sentimental value. I inform her that this house is not a home, nor is it a sanctuary of family memories. It is nothing more than a depreciating real estate asset bound by an ironclad, non-negotiable deed that I currently hold in my possession. I walk away from Eleanor's sobbing form and move to stand at the absolute head of the mahogany table, reclaiming the space Franklin dominated for decades. I look down at the terrified, broken faces of my abusers. They thought they were the architects of this evening, setting a brilliant trap to extort money from their vulnerable, estranged daughter. I deliver the ultimate, devastating truth of the night, my voice slicing through the heavy, humid air with lethal clarity. "You did not invite me home," I announce, looking directly into Franklin's wide, panicked eyes. "I permitted you to stay in my property for one last dinner." The sheer crushing impact of the line detonates in the room. The local reporter violently jabs his digital stylus against his notepad, capturing the legendary quote that will undoubtedly headline tomorrow's front page. The neighbors gathered in the hallway gasp audibly, their hands flying to their mouths as the absolute, undisputed dominance of my statement completely destroys the Thorne family legacy. The finality of those words crushes any remaining pathetic hope Franklin, Eleanor, Toby, or Cassandra harbored. They are no longer the proud owners of a historic Connecticut estate. They are simply unwanted trespassers sitting in my house. I turn my head and signal the Vanguard Capital executive with a single sharp nod. The time for talking gaslighting and desperate grandstanding is permanently over. The trap has snapped entirely shut, the financial receipts have been brutally verified, and the masterstroke has been flawlessly, undeniably executed. I command the senior banker to commence the formal asset seizure, immediately instructing the armed sheriff's deputies to enforce the legal eviction protocols without a single ounce of leniency. The era of the Thorne family is officially dead, and I am the one holding the smoking gun. The Vanguard Capital executive steps back smoothly, yielding the physical floor to the 2 armed sheriff's deputies. The metallic clink of their heavy utility belts echoes sharply in the dead quiet of the ruined dining room. They spread out, establishing a formidable perimeter that instantly traps the Thorne family in a shrinking box of legal authority. Franklin remained slumped against the peeling floral wallpaper, his chest heaving irregularly, completely stripped of his arrogant, patriarchal armor. The sheer, undeniable reality of his immediate eviction finally crushes the last pathetic remnants of his delusional pride. I walk slowly around the edge of the mahogany table, positioning myself exactly where Franklin stood a decade ago when he banished me into a freezing blizzard. I demand their absolute attention without raising my voice a single decibel. Eleanor's hysterical sobbing reduces to a pathetic, choked whimper as she looks up at my freezing, impassive face. Cassandra frantically attempts to snatch her designer leather purse from the back of her chair, but the lead deputy immediately snaps a harsh verbal warning, instructing her to leave all unverified physical assets exactly where they are. "You stood right there," I say, pointing a manicured finger at the exact floorboard beneath Franklin's scuffed dress shoes. "You stood there while the winter wind howled through the open door and told me I was a worthless, unstable parasite. You gave me exactly 10 minutes to pack my entire existence into a duct-taped suitcase before you physically shoved me out into a whiteout snowstorm. You watched me shiver, completely unbothered by the fact that your own flesh and blood could have frozen to death on the streets of this very neighborhood." I reach back into the interior pocket of my tailored silk blazer. I do not extract another crushing legal document or a titanium corporate badge. I pull out a crisp, brand new money clip. The sharp, distinct sound of stiff paper currency sliding against metal cuts through the stifling humidity of the room. I deliberately peel off 2 crisp $100 bills. I hold the money up high, letting the harsh glare of the rented halogen lights illuminate the green ink, executing the ultimate, deeply humiliating callback to their original betrayal. "You gave me $150, I announce, my voice slicing through the room with lethal surgical precision. "You threw the crumpled bills into the snow and told me it was too much money for a pathetic failure. Because I am a professional chief executive, and my corporate acquisitions operate with a marginally higher ethical standard than your abusive parenting, I am feeling incredibly generous today. You have exactly 30 minutes to vacate my property, and here is $200 to cover the cost of your Uber." I release the crisp bills from my fingertips. The money flutters downward in complete silence, rocking gently back and forth in the stagnant air, before landing perfectly on the stained oriental rug, mere inches from Eleanor's trembling knees. The psychological devastation in the room is absolute and total. Franklin stares blankly at the cash on the floor, his eyes hollow and defeated, entirely unable to summon even a microscopic fraction of his former booming rage. He has been financially, legally, and spiritually eradicated by the very daughter he discarded as trash. The lead sheriff's deputy steps forward, his voice booming with uncompromising legal authority as he reads the strict parameters of the eviction notice. He loudly informs the sobbing family that their 30-minute countdown has officially begun. He lists the severe restrictions of their departure, explicitly stating they are only permitted to pack basic personal hygiene items and 1 single bag of standard clothing per person. He warns them that all jewelry, electronics, artwork, and financial documents currently inside the house are now the sole exclusive property of Aegis Biogen's asset management subsidiary. Absolute feral panic instantly erupts among my former relatives. Cassandra screams hysterically about her priceless collection of designer handbags and diamond necklaces, attempting to sprint toward the main staircase. The second deputy physically blocks her path with a rigid arm, sternly warning her that attempting to remove corporate assets will result in her immediate arrest for grand larceny. Toby frantically tries to slide a heavy silver candlestick into the pocket of his trousers, but the Vanguard executive smoothly intercepts his wrist, threatening to add corporate theft to his mounting list of federal charges. Eleanor scrambles on her hands and knees across the dining room floor, desperately trying to gather the antique family portraits resting on the lower shelves of the sideboard. The harsh, unforgiving reality finally sets into her superficial brain. They own absolutely nothing. I watch their frantic, pathetic scrambling with total detachment, feeling no pity for the people tearing their own hair out over lost material possessions. This is the real-time deconstruction of their fake upper-middle-class legacy, a spectacular implosion fueled entirely by their own unmitigated greed and profound arrogance. The local reporter from the Connecticut Chronicle holds his digital recorder high, capturing the entire humiliating scramble for the evening edition. I ensure my posture remains perfectly relaxed, letting the camera lenses document the exact pathetic nature of the Thorne family eviction. The neighbors clustered in the hallway finally break their shocked silence, whispering harsh, condemning judgments to one another. They actively turn their backs on Eleanor when she begs them for a place to stay, completely destroying the Thornes' fabricated social standing in this exclusive suburban community forever. The ticking clock acts as a relentless, invisible hammer against their fragile psyches. The lead deputy loudly announces the 15-minute warning, his voice echoing over Cassandra's continuous, breathless sobbing. The sheer brutal efficiency of the corporate asset seizure is breathtaking to witness. Franklin finally manages to push himself off the floral wallpaper, looking like a hollowed-out, empty shell of a human being. He shuffles weakly toward the main staircase, his shoulders slumped in absolute defeat, leaving his hysterical wife crying on the floor next to the $200. I raise my left wrist, looking down at my smartwatch to confirm the precise timeline of their extraction. I turn to the Vanguard Capital executive, instructing him in a crisp, authoritative tone to initiate the property lockdown protocols the exact second the 30-minute eviction window expires. The swift transition from a toxic, abusive family home to a sterile, heavily guarded corporate asset is almost complete. The stage is flawlessly set for the final brutal arrests and the permanent, spectacular departure of the people who tried to ruin my life. The 30-minute window evaporates with brutal, unforgiving speed. Upstairs, the sounds of panicked scrambling echo through the floorboards. Drawers are violently yanked open and slammed shut. Hangers scrape loudly against wooden closet rods. My former family members are frantically attempting to condense their entire sprawling materialistic lives into the single duffel bags the sheriff's deputies mandated. I remain downstairs, leaning against the archway, listening to the frantic thudding of their footsteps. They are running out of time, and the true nightmare I orchestrated has not even fully materialized yet. Toby rushes down the main staircase, first clutching a designer gym bag so overstuffed the zipper is visibly straining. He is gasping for air, his eyes darting wildly toward the front door. He genuinely believes that if he can just make it to his car, he can outrun the catastrophic financial ruin he engineered. He thinks the worst thing happening tonight is losing his childhood home. He has absolutely no idea that I did not just acquire his defaulted business loans. I also acquired the unencrypted digital ledgers of his illegal cryptocurrency schemes. Before Toby can take another step toward the exit, the heavy oak front door swings open again. The local deputies part seamlessly, making way for three individuals wearing dark windbreakers with bold yellow lettering printed across the back. It is not another banking executive or a local debt collector. It is a specialized financial crimes unit from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They step into the foyer with an unmistakable lethal authority, instantly completely blocking Toby's path to freedom. Toby freezes the heavy gym bag slipping from his sweaty fingers and crashing onto the hardwood floor. The lead federal agent steps forward, unhooking a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. He states Toby's full legal name, reading directly from a federal arrest warrant charging him with multiple counts of wire fraud, securities manipulation, and grand larceny. The agent explicitly mentions the exact fraudulent shell companies Toby used to siphon money from Franklin's accounting firm. I handed that digital ledger directly to the federal authorities 3 days ago. Toby stammers, physically backing up until he hits the staircase banister. He looks wildly around the foyer, his panicked gaze landing on Imani, who has just calmly walked down the stairs carrying a single, meticulously packed suitcase. Toby reaches out a trembling hand toward his wife. He begs her to call her colleagues at the auditing firm, pleading with her to explain that his investments were just misunderstood bridge loans. He desperately expects her to leverage her corporate credibility to shield him from federal prison. Imani does not flinch. She adjusts the strap of her overnight bag, her posture radiating absolute uncompromising dignity. She looks at the man she married, her expression completely devoid of any remaining affection. She tells Toby in a crisp, unwavering voice that she spent her entire career putting white-collar criminals behind bars. She refuses to destroy her own immaculate professional reputation to cover up his pathetic, greedy incompetence. She informs him that she has already contacted a divorce attorney and will be filing the paperwork first thing in the morning. Toby lets out a pathetic, strangled sob as the federal agents grab his arms, forcing them behind his back. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs locking into place echoes loudly through the foyer. Imani does not look back as she walks purposefully past him. She gives me a brief, respectful nod of acknowledgement as she steps out the front door and disappears into the humid Connecticut night, completely freeing herself from the radioactive fallout of the Thorne family legacy. Just as the agents begin reading Toby his Miranda rights, Dion descends the staircase. He is holding his 10-year-old son's hand tightly while his 8-year-old daughter clings to his other arm. He carries a modest travel bag over his shoulder. Dion takes in the surreal, chaotic scene unfolding in the foyer. He watches his brother-in-law being hauled away in federal handcuffs. He looks at the armed deputies enforcing the foreclosure. His pragmatic, protective instincts instantly kick into overdrive. Cassandra rushes down the stairs right behind him, dragging a massive suitcase she is clearly not permitted to take. Her face is blotchy and red from hysterical crying. She grabs Dion's shoulder, frantically demanding that he use his savings to hire Toby a defense lawyer and rent them a luxury hotel suite. She is still entirely disconnected from reality, expecting her grounded, hard-working husband to financially bleed himself dry to uphold her family's toxic, fabricated status. Dion stops at the bottom of the stairs. He gently positions his 2 children behind him, physically shielding them from the grotesque display of Cassandra's unhinged entitlement. He turns to his wife, his dark eyes hard and resolute. He tells Cassandra that she lied to him about her wealth, her debts, and the vile, abusive way she treated her own sister. He states with absolute finality that he will not subject his children to the moral bankruptcy of the Thorne family for another single second. Cassandra screams, begging him not to leave her alone with nothing, but Dion has already made his decision. He tells her, "You lied to me about everything we are done." He does not raise his voice, but the absolute certainty of his words strikes her like a physical blow. He turns his back on her sobbing, pathetic form, guiding his children safely and calmly out the front door. He walks toward his modest, reliable sedan, permanently protecting his kids from the catastrophic destruction I have unleashed. Dion's taillights fade rapidly into the humid Connecticut night, leaving a heavy, suffocating reality in his wake. Cassandra is left screaming on the cracked concrete of the driveway, clutching the straps of a designer duffel bag she is no longer legally allowed to take. The federal agents have already loaded Toby into the back of their unmarked SUV, the flashing red and blue lights casting harsh, unforgiving shadows across the crumbling facade of the Thorne family estate. Franklin emerges from the front door next, carrying a single pathetic plastic grocery bag containing the very few personal hygiene items the Vanguard Capital executive permitted him to keep. The former patriarch of the family is completely broken. His shoulders stooped, his expensive but outdated suit hanging off his frame like a white flag of surrender. He does not even look at me as he shuffles down the stone pathway. Then comes Eleanor. My mother steps out onto the front porch, her hands shaking so violently she can barely hold the small canvas tote bag clutched against her chest. Her expensive mascara is completely ruined, tracking dark, ugly streaks down her pale, horrified cheeks. The meticulously crafted mask of high society matriarchy has been entirely stripped away, leaving nothing but a terrified, bankrupt woman staring into the abyss of her own spectacular making. She looks around the yard, seeing the federal vehicles, the armed sheriff deputies securing the perimeter, and her husband standing helplessly by the overgrown rose bushes. She realizes there is no secret escape hatch, no emergency bridge loan, and no wealthy country club friend coming to her rescue. Eleanor locks her desperate, tear-filled eyes onto me. I am standing near the open door of my armored black sedan, my posture perfectly relaxed, bathed in the soft, ambient glow of the streetlights. She drops her canvas bag onto the porch and practically scrambles down the front steps. Her heels click erratically against the pavement as she rushes toward me, completely ignoring the stern verbal warning from the lead deputy to maintain a respectful distance from the property owner. She throws herself onto the cracked concrete of the driveway, completely abandoning any remaining shred of her elitist dignity. She falls heavily onto her knees right at my feet, her hands reaching out frantically to grasp the hem of my tailored silk trousers. I step back immediately, moving with a sharp, fluid grace that severs her grasping fingers from my clothing before they can even make contact. I look down at her with absolute freezing indifference. I do not feel a single ounce of pity for the woman weeping on the gravel. I do not feel the agonizing pull of childhood attachment or the manufactured guilt she spent 2 decades programming into my developing psyche. I simply see a fraudulent, manipulative debtor who is desperately trying to negotiate her way out of a legally binding, fully executed commercial foreclosure. "Sera, please!" Eleanor wails, her voice a grating, hysterical shriek that echoes down the quiet suburban street and forces the nosy neighbors to step out onto their porches. "You cannot do this to us. You cannot leave us out here on the street like stray animals. We have absolutely nothing left. Toby is going to federal prison. Franklin's firm is completely liquidated. Cassandra's husband just took her children away and left her with nothing. You have to stop this right now. You have the power to fix everything with a single phone call to your bankers. Tell them to stop the seizure. Tell the police to let your brother go." I clasp my hands together in front of me, projecting the lethal, unyielding calm of a chief executive officer overseeing a hostile corporate termination. I inform my mother that I do not possess the legal jurisdiction to reverse federal indictments for wire fraud, nor do I have the slightest inclination to halt a perfectly legal, highly profitable asset seizure. I state clearly that Toby's arrest is the direct, unavoidable consequence of his own catastrophic financial crimes and cryptocurrency gambling. I remind her that Cassandra's marriage collapsed because it was built entirely on a foundation of Thorne family lies. I am not the architect of their misery. I am merely the auditor who finally balanced the books. Eleanor sobs harder, pressing her hands against her chest, as if she is physically wounded by my clinical, emotionless words. She leans forward on her knees, the sharp gravel tearing at her expensive designer dress. "I am your mother," she cries out, playing the absolute final desperate card in her toxic psychological arsenal. "I gave you life, Sera. I carried you. I raised you in that house. You cannot treat your own flesh and blood like a disposable business transaction. Deep down, you know you still love me. You have to forgive me. A daughter cannot just destroy her own mother in cold blood." I tilt my head slightly, analyzing her pathetic performance with absolute surgical precision. I ask her where that overwhelming maternal devotion was 10 years ago, when I was begging her to let me stay in my childhood bedroom just one more night until the raging blizzard passed. I remind her that she stood in that exact doorway sipping a glass of expensive red wine and watched her husband throw a crumpled $150 at my freezing face. I tell her that a real mother would have thrown herself in front of that heavy oak door to protect her child from the winter storm. She did not protect me. She simply stepped over my frozen body to preserve her own comfortable, fraudulent lifestyle. I do not stop there. I raise my voice slightly, ensuring my words carry clearly to the local reporter who is still furiously typing on his digital pad near the mailbox. I ask Eleanor how a loving, devoted mother justifies stealing her youngest daughter's social security number to take out hundreds of thousands of dollars in secret commercial loans. I demand to know how maternal affection translates into ruining my credit score and forcing me to sleep in dangerous homeless shelters, while she funded lavish destination weddings and exclusive spa retreats. I tell her that she permanently traded her title of mother for the title of federal identity thief the exact moment she forged my signature on those banking documents. Eleanor shakes her head violently in denial, though she cannot refute a single documented fact. She begs me to understand the immense social pressure she was under, whining that the country club expectations were suffocating, and Franklin's business was failing so fast she panicked and made a mistake. She pleads for just one more chance, asking me to buy them a small condo, or just pay for a decent hotel suite, until they can get back on their feet. She promises she will go to therapy, she will apologize every single day, she will do whatever I want, if I just show her a tiny fraction of the mercy she deliberately denied me a decade ago. I look down at the sobbing, broken woman on the driveway. The rented halogen lights cast long, harsh shadows across her ruined, tear-stained face. The local neighbors are watching from their lawns in absolute, horrified silence, finally witnessing the true monsters living next door. The Vanguard Capital executive stands stoically by the front porch, holding the heavily sealed foreclosure documents waiting for my final command. I deliver the absolute devastating truth, my voice striking the humid night air with the unstoppable force of a lethal injection. You lost your daughter 10 years ago, I state with uncompromising, chilling authority. Tonight, you just lost your landlord. Eleanor gasps loudly, the sheer brutality of the statement completely knocking the remaining wind out of her lungs. The realization hits her with the crushing, inescapable weight of a collapsing skyscraper. I am not an estranged child returning home for revenge or seeking a tearful reconciliation. I am a corporate entity liquidating a highly toxic bad investment. There is no emotional negotiation left to be had. There is no familial bond left to exploit. The umbilical cord was severed a decade ago in the freezing snow, and the business contract was officially terminated tonight in the dining room. She has absolutely nothing left to leverage. I turn my back on her weeping form without a single ounce of hesitation or regret. I signal to the armed sheriff's deputies standing by the porch. I instruct them to formally escort the remaining trespassers off the premises immediately and thoroughly secure the perimeter of my newly acquired corporate asset. I do not look back as the deputies step forward, grasping Eleanor firmly by the arms and hoisting her off the gravel. The era of Eleanor Thorne's matriarchal tyranny ends right here on the cracked pavement, reduced to a pathetic, whimpering footnote in the spectacular rise of Aegis Biogen. I do not wait to watch the deputies drag my weeping mother across the property line. I walk with deliberate steps toward the idling armored black SUV waiting at the edge of the driveway. My personal security detail steps forward, pulling open the heavy ballistic door. The humid Connecticut air clings to my silk blazer one final time before I step into the pristine cabin. The contrast between the chaotic estate behind me and the immaculate sanctuary of my transport is staggering. I settle into the plush rear seat, projecting the absolute calm of a chief executive who has just closed a volatile acquisition. The heavy armored door swings shut with a vacuum-sealed thud, instantly severing the deafening cacophony of the Thorne family meltdown. The shrill shrieks of Cassandra begging the deputies for her handbags and the frantic bargaining of Franklin are completely extinguished. Inside the cabin, there is only the whisper of the high-end air conditioning. I pour myself a glass of chilled sparkling water from the console refrigerator. My hand does not tremble. My pulse remains at a perfectly optimal rate. The absolute silence inside the vehicle is not just luxury engineering, it is the profound tranquility of total vindication. My driver shifts the vehicle into gear, pulling smoothly away from the cracked curb. I turn my head slightly, gazing out through the heavily tinted bulletproof glass. In the rearview mirror, the spectacular ruin of the Thorne dynasty plays out, illuminated by the violent flashing of red and blue police lights. Federal agents secure the perimeter around Toby's seized assets while local deputies corral Franklin and Eleanor onto the public sidewalk. They are huddled together in the harsh glare of the street lamps surrounded by plastic grocery bags containing their remaining worldly possessions. The house looms behind them, locked down as a seized corporate asset belonging entirely to Aegis Biogen. The neighborhood audience has grown exponentially. Affluent suburbanites stand on their manicured lawns, their glowing smartphone screens capturing every humiliating second of the eviction. These are the very same peers Eleanor and Franklin desperately defrauded me to impress. Now those peers are acting as the eager journalists of my parents' absolute social destruction. The Thorn name, once a shield of arrogance used to justify my abuse, is currently being dragged through the digital mud of local news feeds. I watch the spectacle recede in the glass, feeling a profound clinical satisfaction. I completely incinerated a toxic legacy. I sit back against the premium leather, deliberately checking my own emotional registry. 10 years ago, when I walked down this exact street in a blinding snowstorm, my chest was tearing apart with grief and terror. Tonight, I search for even a microscopic fragment of regret for the biological family I just permanently eradicated. There is absolutely nothing. The emotional void is stark clean and incredibly liberating. The terrified 22-year-old girl who cried over $150 died of hypothermia a decade ago. The billionaire sitting in this SUV feels nothing but cold triumph. I look down at my hands resting in my lap. Faint, jagged scars line my knuckles, permanent physical receipts from the freezing nights I spent sleeping on concrete and fighting to survive. Those scars stand in brilliant contrast to the immaculate tailoring of my designer suit and the heavy titanium CEO badge resting against my chest. The Thorne family thought they were handing me a death sentence when they locked that heavy oak door. They failed to realize they were actually forging the most ruthless competitor in the global biotechnology sector. The armored SUV turns the corner smoothly, merging onto the main arterial road, leading toward the interstate. The decaying colonial house, the flashing federal vehicles, and the shivering figures of my former abusers vanish completely from the rearview mirror. They are permanently relegated to the past, legally and financially neutralized. The dark, quiet highway stretches out ahead of me, leading directly back to the glowing skyline of Manhattan and the multi-billion-dollar corporation I built from scratch. I face forward, breathing in the purified air, completely detached from the wreckage and absolutely ready for whatever comes next. The ambient lighting inside the SUV is calibrated to a soft, icy blue, perfectly matching the profound serenity washing over me. The low hum of the engine and the rhythmic whisper of the tires against the asphalt provide the only soundtrack to my departure. I am halfway back to Manhattan, the decaying Connecticut suburbs, replaced by the stark, functional architecture of the interstate highway. My heart rate is entirely normal. My breathing is steady and deep. I do not feel the crushing, agonizing weight of filial obligation or the suffocating panic that used to define my existence whenever I was near the Thorne family. I feel nothing but the clean, sharp edge of absolute liberation. A sharp, single vibration against my wrist breaks the silence. I raise my left hand, the screen of my smartwatch illuminating the dark cabin. It is a highly encrypted priority notification from Marcus Vance, the lead senior partner of Aegis Biogen's legal division. I tap the screen once, routing the incoming transmission directly to the secure earpiece resting in my right ear. Marcus does not offer polite greetings or waste time with corporate pleasantries. He operates with the same ruthless surgical efficiency that I demand from every executive on my payroll. Ms. Thorne, Marcus states, his voice crisp and professional through the encrypted channel. I am formally confirming that the asset seizures have been flawlessly executed across all designated properties and portfolios. The commercial liquidations are currently processing through the federal systems. Furthermore, I have personally verified that the severance of all legal familial ties has been officially recorded and sealed by the presiding judge. You hold absolutely zero liability, financial or otherwise, to Franklin Eleanor Toby or Cassandra Thorne. You are 100% legally permanently free. I close my eyes, absorbing the absolute finality of his words. The nightmare that began with a blizzard and $150 has officially been terminated with a multi-billion-dollar corporate execution. I instruct Marcus to proceed with the final liquidation protocols and disconnect the secure channel. I pull my unlisted smartphone from the interior pocket of my blazer, the same device that received 65 desperate, manipulative voicemails just 24 hours ago. I open the family group chat, a digital graveyard of toxic gaslighting, pathetic demands, and blatant financial extortion. I do not read a single word of the frantic messages currently flooding the thread, as my former family realizes they are completely and utterly destroyed. I tap the settings icon, selecting the option to permanently delete the entire chat history. The screen goes blank, erasing a decade of digital abuse in a fraction of a second. I systematically block every single number associated with the Thorne family, guaranteeing they will never be able to reach me, manipulate me, or demand a single cent from my empire ever again. I lower the phone, looking toward the glowing skyline of Manhattan, visible in the distance, and tell my driver to accelerate. The past is completely eradicated, and my future is absolutely untouchable. If you have ever had to cut ties with a toxic family to protect your peace and build your own empire, share your story in the comments below and hit that subscribe button for more tales of ultimate vindication.